They could really use the help of such a powerful, awakened one as the Crimson Witch. In response to this, the girl thought for a while and then asked the guys if they knew how to drink alcohol. This unexpected continuation of the conversation caused surprise on the faces of the restaurant guests, but they agreed. After some time, Costa was able to free himself from his bonds and return to the establishment. He was angry that the boys had messed up so much, but he was glad that he had convinced them to go somewhere else for the second round. The guy noticed that the quest was still not completed because the corresponding notification window had not appeared, but he thought that the girl would somehow sort out this matter. The Guardian replied that the level did not rise so quickly. Perhaps this was due to the fact that the guys were quite famous. After which, Costa offered to go to the mountains with him as a reward for the quest. He said he was going to get ingredients to cook a nutritious meal for himself and his mother. He was going to dig up and prepare a plant that could only be found on the mountain. It was useful for those suffering from lung cancer. In addition, this mountain is considered a gray area, and Galgoro black bears have often been seen there. These are demonic monsters, the danger level of which reaches the first level. They have a rather nasty character and capture a large territory. As soon as an intruder appears on it, they begin a battle with him to the death, even if the intruder is the same bear. Therefore, the only race that can get along with them is the golden bees, which can hardly be called demonic monsters. The keeper clearly didn't like being put on a leash, but Costa noticed that it would be difficult to move around the city without it. So, he asked the wolf to be patient a little. It was all for the sake of restoring stamina and finding ingredients for the food that the guy was going to cook, which pleased the keeper a little. The truth was, let it all be for the sake of finding the next guardian and trying to impose succession on another person. But the wolf still had little reason to justify going into someone else's house to save a dying man. This behavior only meant that the guardian actually loved people very much. After which, Costa thought that he was really taking advantage of the kindness of his guardian god. However, the guy noticed that he was not going to become his successor. He was not going to become someone as great at all. After this, a complete image of a guardian wolf immediately appeared in our hero's head. The guy had already forgotten what he looked like in his usual size. After which, the hero decided that it would not be difficult for him to protect one single person. After some time, the strange company of a man and a white dog arrived on the mountain. The guys had been walking around looking for the plant they needed for a long time. Finally, they found the necessary ingredient and began to assemble it. Costa was just telling his friend that the taste of this plant is not the main thing, because it helps well in restoring stamina. Before he could finish speaking, he immediately felt the presence of a huge black bear. The wolf also immediately felt the energy that emanated from this monster. Our hero put the plants behind his back, straightened up, and asked the keeper to hold the bear for a while. He would have done it himself, but he had something more important to accomplish than that. He took out a glass jar from his bag that he had prepared in advance. The honey from the bees he talked about at home is very tasty and restores a lot of stamina. After these words, the keeper agreed to detain the bear, which made our hero very happy. The guy asked to give him about 10 minutes to collect honey, after which he had to return and help the keeper. A huge bear, angry at the presence of strangers on its territory, advanced on the intruders. Costa saw the monster approaching, so he once again asked his guardian friend to detain him for 10 minutes, after which he promised to return soon and set off at lightning speed in search of honey, so as not to waste a second of time. The smaller wolf took a deep breath from the fact that such a difficult task was assigned to him. At this time, the bear wasted no time. With its huge paws, it broke the thick trunks of perennial trees with one blow. The guardian looked at his opponent. He could not believe that he had actually agreed to this adventure. At about the same moment, Costa had already reached the place he needed. So he was now sitting on a tree and thinking about a plan of action. The guy was still a little worried, but he was sure that the keeper would be able to take care of himself, and he had more important tasks now. From his mana, the guy formed small golden balls that were supposed to help him in his business. Then, still high in the tree, Costa sent them to the nearby territory. He knew that even by lightly touching the bees with magical power, they could be forced to return to the hive, and it would not be difficult for him to find them. As soon as he thought about it, one of the bees fell into his trap. Thanks to this, our hero immediately guessed where he should go next. Therefore, he pushed off with force from the tree branch and moved after the insect. It was not difficult for him to find a bee among all these forest plantations, thanks to his magic. After that, all he could do was follow her closely. After all, he would need about 5,000 bees to receive honey at least once a month, and in addition to the excellent taste, it also perfectly restores stamina. Therefore, Costa was very happy that he was able to stumble upon a large flower field, which was completely filled with bees. The guy froze briefly in admiration for such a beautiful view that revealed itself to him in this forest clearing. One of the giant bees landed on his hand, and the guy realized that everything was fine with their size. He began to look around in the hope of finding the place from where they were all flying out. Having walked a little to the side and moved the branch to the side, our hero found what he was looking for. Not far from the clearing, among the small trees, there was a huge beehive. Costa was very surprised by such a huge size, although he was counting on it. He was especially pleased that, thanks to such a large size, there would be enough honey to come here not once a month but once a week. Our hero began to knock on the walls of the bee house, hoping to snatch a piece of it for himself, and the insects stung him. Defending their shelter, our hero still managed to collect a sufficient amount of pure, beautiful honey. Costa knew that this would be enough for him for the first time, so he was excited about his first test. The guy really thought that he should come here every week. Suddenly, something surprised him very much, and he even exclaimed a curse. In fact, Costa remembered that he had completely forgotten about his friend, the Guardian. At this time, the Guardian was fighting an unequal battle with a huge magical bear. In the heat of the slaughter, the animals even got to the hero himself, which allowed Costa to find himself on the battlefield. The guy immediately rushed to his white wolf, coming to his aid. The Guardian was clearly very exhausted, so Costa immediately apologized for losing track of time. The guy put his hand on his friend's now soiled white fur. He realized that he had too high expectations for him because he was far from in the best shape. The hero realized that the keeper came to his house out of his kindness. He did everything he could to help him, but the hero took it for granted. He even sent his wolf, in his weak state, to fight a real magical bear. The guy realized that everything happened through his fault, so he promised himself not to kill the monster with lightning speed. He went to attack the monster and put all his strength into one single blow to the head. His intention was simply to euthanize the animal. About a week later, we then see the restaurant owner come out onto the porch to meet someone. She saw her son returning, all rumpled and dirty from a run on the mountain. The guy said that today they were very lucky. He was able to get fairly cheap honey and dug up some medicinal plants. But their conversation was interrupted by a company consisting of Sergey, Diana, and Dasha, who fell out of the restaurant with a hangover. They tearfully asked our hero to prepare hangover soup for them, and he was angry that they had the audacity to drink all night, and then come here again. At first, his mother did not understand how to react to such a strange gathering, but then she cheered up, following the rest of the company. She had no idea that this was a completely unusual honey. So she suggested making them some refreshing honey water to help them relax. Our hero asked his mother not to stress too much. The woman said that everything was fine with her, but let him not neglect the connections he had already created. She took the jar of honey from her son's hands and sent him to prepare breakfast. Meanwhile, the Guardian again turned into a small white dog and rested in our hero's bag. Several years ago, young Dasha told our hero that once when she was adopted, she was immediately sent back, which surprised the guy. He asked if it was normal for her to tell him this. However, she added that, at that age, she could not do anything about her anger. So 2 months later, those people sent her back to the orphanage. At the time, she didn't understand why she was returned, but as she grew older, she began to understand the reason. The girl was clearly upset about something, so she said that she needed to hide who she really was. After that, in all foster homes, families, she began to behave as calmly and sweetly as possible. Dasha said that she tried to adhere to this pattern of behavior for the rest of her life. These memories came flooding back to our hero as he looked at his now eccentric, drunken girlfriend. Dasha jokingly said that honey water is so good that it seems to her that he added something else to it. After that, the whole company began to discuss what a wonderful cook Costa had become. They also complimented our hero for looking very young for his age. They endlessly demanded hangover soup, breakfast, or honey water, which greatly irritated our hero. The guy warned that he wanted to fry some of the plants that he had dug up in the mountains, but he immediately warned that he wouldn't give much to the guests because, in fact, he was doing it for his mother. Sergey was immediately surprised that, even though the guy had honey and plants in stock, it was extremely difficult to get this food. At this time, the guy asked his secretary whether Costa would be uncomfortable if he also paid, although he had even prepared a gift. He had prepared them as a thank you to his friends. One of his employees gave them to him this morning. Dasha was very inspired by such a surprise, so she asked to give her gift first. She joyfully extended both hands forward, expecting Sergey to put something in them. The guy turned around, reached into his bag, took out a box, and put it right in the girl's hands. Dasha immediately noticed that even the box looked very cool and asked if it could be opened. After permission, the girl carefully opened the lid. Inside, on a red velvet pillow, lay a watch, and she immediately put the gift on the table and said that it looked very expensive. She could not accept it. Sergey noticed that this was a gift, including for her future help. The watch was fireproof and should withstand even the strong flame of the Crimson Witch. Dasha listened carefully to every word the guy said. The girl was absolutely delighted with this gift. She really liked it. She even jokingly asked Sergey if she could marry him. At this time, footsteps were heard from the inside of the house, and someone entered the kitchen. It turned out to be the owner of the house, who came downstairs because of the noise. She saw that her son needed help, so she decided to go to him. In fact, the guy had everything under control. He brought out an absolutely amazing platter of appetizers. Every person present here spoke positively about the smell, color, and appearance of the food. Costa said that this was done thanks to the amazing culinary skills of his school friend Dasha, meaning himself. After that, he put away the extra dishes in the sink, then joined his friends at the table and asked if it seemed to him that Dasha was going to marry Sergey. The guy was in such shock, but the girl happily began nodding her head in agreement. There was probably still alcohol in their heads. That's why the guys reacted like that. Sergey looked at Costa and his mother and tried to convince them that this was just a joke. He explained that he just gave the girl a gift. He had prepared it for the owner of the restaurant, but now a strange atmosphere arose. The hero's mother was amazed that someone had prepared a surprise before her, but she was pleased. At this time, Sergey pulled out from his bag another similar box with a watch on a pillow. The woman also admitted that the watch was very beautiful, but she doubted whether she should accept such a gift. However, the guy said that everything was fine because her son saved their lives. Now they would go to the restaurant quite often. He suggested thinking of it as a bribe, as a joke. After which, he began to talk about one special place, a dwarven workshop. The guy continued to talk about how the dwarves are one of the races that came to Earth after the Great Cataclysm. Sergey added that the Great Cataclysm was both a disaster and an opportunity for them too. Since they could not find ways to return, they decided to adapt to life on Earth because they had no other choice. So the government gave them a region to settle. The company recruited them to sell little things that they could make with their techniques. He didn't have time to finish when Dasha immediately understood what was going on. She said that they recently aired an advertisement, and a kitchen knife made from it looked very cool. The company is quite popular among housewives. His mother was surprised that her gift was bought in such a great place. Sergey awkwardly noted that since they were stopping in one place anyway, he put away the gifts there too. The guy began to talk about how it was always profitable, but he was afraid that he had upset his mother too much with his cold calculations. However, the woman still said that she would accept such a gift with gratitude. She admitted that if she refused, it would be rude to them because they spent so much effort on getting this watch. Sergey was very pleased that such a wonderful woman thanked him sincerely. Before the guy could remember the joy, someone's strong hand grabbed him by the tie. Then the fist clenched forcefully and even began to cause some pain to Sergey. It was Costa who put a threatening expression on his face and ordered his friend to be honest with him. Sergey was even frightened by such an unexpected reaction to this story, and Costa, with a furious expression on his face, asked where the workshop that makes the famous kitchen knives was located. Sergey was confused, even tears appearing in his eyes. He did not expect such a question and such a reaction at all. After that, the guys were separated. Sergey went to cry to his secretary, and Mom and Dasha scolded Costa. This still did not stop the guys from going to that same dwarven workshop. A little later, Costa was in this area for the first time because he had appeared during his absence. He expected it to be some kind of strange place, but it looked quite good, a fairly reliable building. He ordered the wolf to follow him, although he did not understand why he came here. The guy explained that it is ideal to be as passionate about completing the quest as possible. This was the only way to quickly cure our hero's mother, with which the keeper could not but agree. He wanted to answer something to our hero, but he was not allowed to do so. A red disc flew right in front of the wolf's nose, and a beast-like monster rushed after it. It was surprising that people did not run away in fear. On the contrary, they watched this performance with enthusiasm. The guardian looked at all this as if he was not at all surprised. He admitted that the dwarves were quite comfortable on the ground because such physical ability could be used to perform acrobatic feats. However, then, he looked at how some human child was sitting on the neck of an animal and added that they were a rather aggressive race, so their pride could be hurt. Costa looked around and noticed one dwarf whose fur color seemed familiar to him. Suddenly, a security alert sounded throughout the village, calling on all visitors to leave the place. But our hero clearly had no intention of following this decree. Costa was almost caught by a guard, so he had to quickly go behind a tree and hide from his sight. The guy thought that sooner or later he would be discovered, so he needed to use the skill of stealth. However, as soon as he started using magic, someone suddenly attacked him from behind. The guy barely had time to jump away from the tree when a blow immediately fell there. If he had not managed to do this, his body would also be cut into several parts, just like this trunk. The monster held enormous power in his hands. Even the earth cracked under his onslaught. In fact, the monster sensed the use of magic, so it came to check its source. However, the guy replied that he knew him, even called him the Blue Fang tribe, and suggested that the monster's name was Tyler. The gray wolf was very surprised by this guy's strange reaction, and our hero noticed that the wolf was not so familiar with a large number of people, but still managed to forget him. The guy said with a smile that he just wanted to clarify whether it was really his friend, but it turned out to be him. After reuniting, this small company went to the dwarven home itself, while the wolf was calling to a certain old man. The guardians noticed that this guy also had a quest. Costa replied that he first wanted to meet his old acquaintance and then watch the quest itself. After some time, a small old man came to the threshold of the house and immediately recognized our hero. The guy was very happy about such a meeting after a long separation. He immediately stood up from his seat and said the old man's real name. This grandfather was also very happy to meet him and called our Costa hero Choi. The men walked towards each other to greet each other. Costa heard that the old man had moved to live in another place, but he could not think that this was Earth. To which the old friend noted that, in fact, they did not intend to live here in the first place. He said that one day, 5 years ago, the hero Costa Choi was called up at the first meeting. The old man immediately drew attention to the hero's strange sword, which had a blade that was too large for his body, and the handle was too thick. He said that although the material of the sword plays an important role, it is also important whether the blade is suitable for its owner. After the old man tried to pronounce the hero's name several times, he suggested simply calling him Hero Choi. In gratitude for saving his family and tribe, the dwarves decided to upgrade his sword to better suit him. His little granddaughter came out behind them and screamed that her grandfather was called a genius, which appeared once every 100 years. So he was definitely telling the truth. Costa was amazed at such a bold reaction from this little girl, so he could not ignore the old man's advice. He happily handed his sword to the master and offered to play with the children while the work was going on. In fact, his games were quite strange. They brought children to tears because the guy was spinning these little dwarves on his shoulders with such force that their bodies simply could not stand it. He was asked to moderate his actions a little, after which the guy calmed down a little and decided to talk with the older dwarves. The little girl replied that the dwarves did not stay in one place until the ore was depleted, but they themselves were on the move and were almost at their destination. The world in which they lived, due to the invasion of demons, began to resemble ruins more. The magic of teleportation, which allows them to move between worlds, spends a large amount of bodily and magical power and could have trapped them in the eternal universe if they had miscalculated. Therefore, they thought that they were very lucky to get into the kingdom of spirits until they were attacked by ostriches. The whole family was preparing for the inevitability of death until, at the last moment, a hero suddenly appeared and saved them. The granddaughter said that they all survived only thanks to him, but still, she didn't think they would stay here for long. After this, the guy admitted that he himself also did not belong to the kingdom of spirits. He is here only until they get rid of all the demons. In any case, the guardians of this place will not send him back until he wins and achieves his goal. The girl listened carefully to his story and offered her help. She said that she could return the hero back to the world from which he came, which greatly surprised him. He even thought that the guy didn't hear her, so she repeated her offer again. She said that she would need to ask the elders first, but since the hero helped them, she did not think that they would be against it. The hero didn't expect everything to happen so quickly, so he didn't know how to respond to this. He needed some time to think about her proposal and decide. Meanwhile, the granddaughter continued to talk about how they would have to try several times, but mistakes could not be avoided, and they would also need a huge amount of magical power. But I suggested that even with a huge amount of power, they would still need to complete the magic that allowed them to travel between dimensions. In addition, even if the probability of making a mistake was almost zero, the risk of getting lost in space still remained. The girl was amazed that the guy knew a lot about their own magic. Therefore, Costa looked at her with gratitude and decided to refuse their offer because he believed that he would still be able to return to his home world. At that moment, images of his mother and Dasha came into our hero's head. However, the last time he saw them was so long ago that they were blurry, and the guy could not remember anything clearly. At this moment, one of the adults from the tribe approached them and warned them that the sword was almost ready. This made our hero very happy, so he suggested coming closer and waiting there. He once again expressed his gratitude to this little girl and asked her not to be upset. After some more time, Costa was surprised that the dwarf family still decided to come to another dimension. The news was told to him by the huge lion, who had heard it from someone else. Our hero was very happy for his friends, but at the same time he was surprised why they decided to leave so suddenly. Perhaps, in that world, there were many magical stones that the courtyards really needed. Most of the stones in this world are found inside monsters, and dwarves are not very good at fighting, so digging would be ideal for them. But in the spirit realm, this type of stone is difficult to find. After this conversation, our hero climbed onto the back of his friend, the lion. He decided that he definitely needed to say goodbye to his old acquaintances. Lev warned that Maxime was there, helping the tribe to travel their magic through the dimension. Our hero was not very friendly with this maxim but promised not to do anything, after which this strange couple immediately went to the village. The huge lion covered long distances in just one jump, so the hero had to hold tightly to his mane. At this time, in the village, the elder was already running towards Costa. Both of them were very glad to see each other after quite a long separation. Costa said that he hoped the tribe would get used to this place and settle here, but it seems too difficult for them. He can help them with many things, but he was powerless against the ecosystem. The guy noticed that the old man had tears in the corner of his eyes, ready to flow. He admitted that the hero already helped them a lot. He saved them from death many times. If not for him, they themselves would have become spirits and would not have tried to travel through dimensions. After these words, another dwarf came out of the crowd and brought out something in his hands. The old man asked to accept this as a small parting gift. This bow was made by one of the best blacksmiths in the history of their tribe. At one time, he was the 7th leader who became famous for his artificial skill. This bow does not need arrows. You can simply pour in magical power and the arrow will appear on its own. Costa was amazed and asked if they were sure that they wanted to give him something valuable. However, in response, the elder bowed to him and said that thanks to his courage, they themselves wanted to become better. This is their way of repaying him. He offered it himself because the bow is the treasure of their tribe. However, before this, they all consulted together, so this is a gift from the entire tribe. Only after this, Costa noticed that now not only the old man, but also absolutely all the inhabitants of this settlement were bowing to him. The magic portal had already been opened, so the old man finally added that he prayed that in the future there would be no difficulties on the hero's path. Remembering all this, our hero could barely hold back his tears from the surging emotions. But at this time, the whole company sat in the human world and enjoyed their reunion at the game. The old man admitted that he did not hope he would be able to see the hero again, so he was really happy. Then he added that he heard Costa wanted to ask him for a favor. After that, our hero remembered why he came here in the first place. He handed the elder a note with a drawing and said that he was going to give it to a hunter he knew, so he just needed the device to work without having to put in a lot of effort. The old man thought for a long time, and the hero even thought that this was too difficult a task. Grandfather explained that the density of magical power on the ground was too weak, so now they couldn't activate the brazier using magical power, and the mana core was damaged in the last move. They were prepared for the fact that something would go wrong during the spatial transition, so they landed on the ground without any problems. He apologized for the fact that the hero had put so much effort into finding them, but the tribe was defeated. To this, the hero remarked with a smile that they had absolutely no need to apologize to him. The elder was surprised by the guy's easy reaction to his words. However, the hero asked his elder friend to come a little closer to him. After that, he pointed his hand in his direction and began to exude some kind of magic from it. He used this power to restore his friend. The old man immediately felt that something had happened to his mana core. Costa explained that he tried to invest magical and life force. Although today was the same as before, it should have been much better. After that, he gave his friend a whole glass of golden bee honey, which could help him. The guy admitted that he was lucky and was able to get some, so now he was happy to give some of it to his friend. Costa said that he would try to make sure the entire tribe could restore their mana core, but in the middle of the conversation, he noticed that the dwarf began to cry. The guy immediately rushed to find out what happened. Suddenly, the old man reacted like that. He said that with such help he would only need 1 day to complete the task. He was very grateful for the help. He looked at the drawing on the sheet and said that he would try to complete everything on time. After that, our hero returned home using his unimaginable power, doing it in the blink of an eye. He immediately received a message from Sergey that the date had finally been determined when they could go on a raid in the dungeon. Costa continued to talk to him on the phone, and at this time he went inside the restaurant. Sergey said that in 3 days, the dungeon itself would appear, and their raid would take place in 7 days. After that, our guy asked if his friend Dasha had told him about this. He was not satisfied with the answer, so he invited Sergey back to his restaurant to discuss the problem. But he could hear absolutely nothing. He only burst into tears while lying on the table. It turned out that Dasha agreed while she was drunk, and then sobered up and simply took back her words after the party. The girl heard Sergey's proposal again and said that she didn't remember anything. Then, she added that she didn't work in groups at all. Costa calmed his friend down and said that he should have concluded a written contract with the girl or recorded the conversation while they were drinking. After this, our hero came up with a great idea, so he invited Sergey to have a drink during the day. He added that Dasha herself loves to drink throughout the day. According to their plan, Costa was supposed to try to negotiate with her, and Sergey was to take advantage of this. After that, our hero immediately dialed his friend's number to ask her to come to the restaurant. The girl did not pick up the phone for quite a long time, but eventually did. She immediately said that she had warned him yesterday that she would not do anything for him. However, Costa noticed that he had a different opinion about his friend, who had never broken a promise to someone before, but he himself called for a completely different reason. He just wanted to offer her a drink, after which they agreed on a time to meet and hung up. The first phase was completed successfully. After the end of the conversation, Costa said that he was able to drag Dasha into the restaurant, so the second stage of the plan was up to Serge. The young director was very grateful to his friend for what he did for him, after which he left him alone in the hall and went to the kitchen to prepare snacks. At this time, a car stopped outside with a huge squeal of tires. The young businessman shouted to his friend, the cook, that the girl had arrived. Dasha entered the restaurant and hoped that all preparations for drinking had already been completed. She was very surprised to see Sergey because no one warned her about this. The girl was angry that they called her for this, but Costa said that Sergey was just passing by and decided to come in. He wanted to leave when he heard that Dasha would come here soon, but she caught him on the way out. So, he suggested that they both stay. Sergey was grateful for this offer but asked whether everything would be fine. He was worried about Dasha's reaction, but the girl said that nothing bad would happen and he could stay. Sat down at the table, they began to discuss the snacks that their mutual friend had recently prepared. However, Dasha still noted that she would not change her decision, even if they all drank together, because she had never participated in dungeon raids. She was already responsible for the faults, and it was more comfortable for her to work alone, especially since a group of at least 5 people was legally allowed to clear the dungeon. The girl noticed that she and her team tried to work together, but most were focused on their opponents more than she was. They were strong enough alone, so teamwork did not go well. Sergey was jealous that they were strong alone, but the girl did not share his feelings. In fact, she didn't want the whole world to know that the more she used her powers, the crazier she became. If others found out, they would likely even publish an article saying that the Flame Witch had gone crazy. Before this, she had silenced people with money, but she couldn't imagine how to silence the awakened ones of the wealthy Shinua Guild and their workers. While they were all sitting at the table and eating, the girl muttered something under her breath, after which Costa noticed that the girl easily breaks promises and refuses without even explaining the reason. He said that Sergey must please his father and not get caught by the yellow press. Everything was so bad that he was forced to ask for help from an unemployed guy from a street restaurant. So, he asked to take all this into account. He added that, even though what Costa said was true, Dasha should not feel obligated. The girl tried to appear again, but the guy didn't let her do it. Sergey repeated his phrase, this time emphasizing the word obliged. Dasha immediately realized that she was simply being manipulated, so she was embarrassed. She noted that it was useless to try to put such pressure on someone who had no parents or other family members to impress, to which Costa noted that, in fact, Dasha has him and his mother, so she has no right to say that. The girl replied that, for a guy who had been missing for 10 years, he had no conscience at all, but she still thought about something. After some time, Dasha said that she would still help Sergey with the dungeon if he stopped behaving like that, to which Costa knew that the girl had been constantly changing her mood lately. However, she didn't answer anything. She just continued drinking and praised the taste of the alcohol. Our hero thought that sometimes he doesn't understand his girlfriend at all. However, he noticed a system notification that the quest to conclude a contract for a raid in a dungeon with Dasha was completed. He received 5 million karma for this. Literally, a moment later, Dasha and Sergey were already drunk and went on a spree. While the guys were resting and preparing for future work, Costa went to the kitchen and decided to clean up a little. The guy was focused on this matter when he noticed that someone was about to enter his restaurant. Literally, a moment later, the door opened, and an elder and a huge gray wolf walked inside. After that, the trio went to a park nearby to see something. Both dwarves were very surprised that, in the middle of the city, there was a tree of peace growing on the ground. Meanwhile, it had already grown quite tall, even sprouting several branches and illuminating everything around with its magnificent appearance. Costa said that this is the same tree the world gave him his seed before he returned. It grows quite well. The elder even noted that the spirit responsible for it must live here. Costa admitted that he couldn't even grow a cactus himself, so he simply made a contract with a spirit nearby, then clapped his hands, urging it to come out immediately. After this, a small spirit flew out of the crown of a small tree towards the friends. He was very cute. Costa admitted that he called him Christ because he was very similar to him, to which the elder noticed that this little spirit did not at all look like a cricket. These words struck our hero to the very heart. However, the grandfather admitted that the spirit had done an excellent job looking after the place. After which, Christ flew up to the wolf and handed him a golden leaf. It was real moongrass, which he never ate because it is very difficult to find. Costa told him to try it, although the wolf would not be able to regain its true magical power, but it should restore a decent part of it. The huge monster looked at this small leaf, completely not believing in its miraculous powers. However, he still decided to trust his old friend and hastily tossed it into his mouth. As soon as he swallowed it, his mana core immediately felt a surge of power. The wolf noticed that this method worked. His energy immediately increased. Costa noted that this is a temporary effect, but moongrass grows here, so the wolf can sometimes come here and take it. He also asked his old friend, the elder, if he could enter into a contract with spirits on Earth. But without waiting for an answer, Costa stepped a little to the side, bent down, and began digging in the ground, after which he pulled the small mole spirit to the surface, offering to try it on him first. He said that if something happened, he would help. His magical power. After that, both the elder and our hero extended their hands to the spirit. They laid down their magical powers in an attempt to form a contract. This method worked because the little mole immediately greeted his owner and asked for a name. Costa noticed that, as soon as the old man gave him a name, the mole would become his spirit. The grandfather was very embarrassed and decided to name his new mole Gray. Immediately after this, a contract between the old man and the spirit was concluded. The little mole turned into a shiny little ball and disappeared into thin air until he was called. The old man noticed that the hero constantly helps him, even in this world. He said that the thing behind the wolf's back was what the guy asked for. Costa took the burden off his old friend's shoulders and opened the box. He was amazed by the appearance and magical power of this beautiful bow. He was worried that the hero didn't like his gift, but the guy noticed that it even exceeded his expectations. After which, our hero decided to try it out first. He supported the weapon in his hands and noticed that it was beautiful, like any work of this master. The old man and the wolf looked at their friend, and one thought occurred to them. They realized that, no matter how much time had passed, this guy remained the same hero they had once met. Looking at this guy, they realized that he most likely chose the right path. He allowed them to live peacefully, so all they could do was help him without question. At this point, the meeting was over. The guys said goodbye until next time. Immediately after this, our hero's phone rang. He thought it was Sergey. However, as soon as he picked up the phone, Costa almost went deaf from the scream that came from the speaker. He was ready to kill his interlocutor for such a domestic attack, but he restrained himself. Sergey joyfully called him to report that everything worked out for them. He had just reported to his father, and since this was good news, he decided that Costa should be the first to know about it. He also added that tomorrow he would have to meet his father. The hero was very glad that he could help his friend. His sense of guilt only grew with each new word from Sarge, who kept saying this was entirely his fault. However, this was not all the news, because the young man once mentioned the hero in a conversation with his father. Therefore, he said that he wanted to meet with him. So, on the day of the dungeon raid, the whole team would have a snack at their restaurant. This news was so big that Costa was delighted and, at the same time, terrified of the upcoming cooking. A few days later, there was a raid. Costa carried boxes of food on the road. He looked around and thought that too many people had gathered here. Even his mother was tired under the influx of such a huge number of people. So, the hero sent her to rest until lunch. He told the woman he could do it alone, but in reality the guy was terrified of how much work he had to do. Suddenly, a man approached him wearing a very expensive shining watch on his wrist. He looked very good for his age. His appearance was clearly well looked after. The man introduced himself as Sergey's father and extended his hand to our hero for acquaintance. Costa was surprised that, usually, people of higher status do not look at people of lower class. Sergey's father clearly noticed the confusion on our hero's face when he turned to Costa. He immediately thought that something terrible would happen. For example, he could order to stop hanging around his son because they live in different rooms. The guy had a low status in the crowd, so he had to humiliate him in his refined aristocratic manner, after which he and his mother would be forced to flee into exile. This happened only in his imagination, but Costa had already begun to mentally apologize to his mother. He decided that if he apologized first, the man would be more lenient, because he would take him by surprise. Therefore, the young guy immediately bowed to the man, hitting his head hard on the table. Instead of all this nonsense, he offered him to work for the company. Sergey's father was amazed at such a strange reaction from our hero. The guy, who was bleeding from his head, did not expect such a generous offer at all. After some time, when the blood was stopped and ice was applied to the head, both men sat down on a bench nearby and began to talk. First of all, Costa thanked his friend's father for his experiences and once again apologized for what happened. The man repeated that he would like to work with the young man, but noticed that he was going to refuse. Costa really noticed that now he wanted to devote himself entirely to his family, so he wasn't sure whether he could cope with his work, to which the man noted that they themselves like to read people by their facial expressions, or rather, it comes to many people with age and life experience. So, he looked carefully at the guy again and said that he makes people put their hopes on him. Costa was very grateful for this assessment and was even a little embarrassed. They would have continued talking about their business if a whole crowd of people had not suddenly run up to the president. They informed him that a raid on the dungeon would begin soon, and reporters were already waiting for him. He turned to Costa and said that he had already understood from the conversation that he had rejected his proposal. However, it still remains in force, so he asked our hero to think again, after which he said goodbye and left. After that, Costa decided that he should go check on the guys. Just in time. Dasha looked so bad that Costa even clarified what was happening to her. The girl replied that she was so nervous that she might even vomit. The hero was surprised that his girlfriend could be nervous, for which he received punishment. The girl noticed that this was indeed her first experience of working in a team. Costa pointed out that if she refused again, Sergey would burst into tears. Dasha admitted to her friend that the more she used fire, the more she lost her sanity. So she was worried that this would cause bad rumors about the Crimson Witch's reputation. Costa tried to cheer her up and said that she had no reputation anyway. Hearing the words that no one cared about her, the girl flew into a real rage. Meanwhile, Sergey, who led the raid, gave interviews to reporters. He turned his attention to his friend Costa, who came up to him to say goodbye before leaving. The young entrepreneur immediately noticed that something had happened to his friend's head. In order not to embarrass anyone present, our hero walked away and stood nearby behind a tree. After that, Costa carefully examined his friend and noticed that he had been training a lot. The guy was delighted that someone noticed his external changes. He admitted that he was a little nervous and wanted everything to work out. So he did a little preparation in advance. Costa noted that Sergey always tries his best, and this impresses him. Sergey's inner mood noticeably improved from just these encouraging words. In fact, Costa noticed that his friend had raised the whole class, but something still worried him. There was a suspiciously frightening aura emanating from their dungeon. Costa hoped that this was all just his paranoia. By that time, all preparations for the raid had already been completed. Sergey and his team set off, finally asking the cook to prepare food for them before returning. Costa waved goodbye to his friend, hoping that everything would go well for him. However, after some time, in a huge mountain of prepared food, the guy only thought that if his friend returned alive and unharmed, he would kill him himself. Just then, his mother finished counting and packing the boxes. The awakened should have already returned, so the guy had to hurry up and clean everything up. Suddenly, a strange feeling of anxiety and danger pierced the entire body of our hero. He was not the only one who felt this, because even the birds decided to leave these places. Costa looked at the flying flocks and agreed that he was experiencing a frightening feeling at this moment. Even the guardian began hot, rendingly calling for our hero. He was literally screaming that something was clearly wrong with the dungeon. But literally 8 minutes ago, Dasha stood in it, breathing heavily after the fight. The girl had just single-handedly defeated a whole crowd of giant scorpions. She was so strong that everyone else in the raid didn't even have to make any effort. The Crimson Witch, at that moment, was worried that people were looking at her like she was crazy. After which, Diana noticed that they entered the dungeon only 6 minutes ago. Sergey was also amazed at how strong his new friend turned out to be. After that, the guys went as close as possible to the Crimson Witch to help her if she needed anything. The girl noticed that there were no more monsters nearby, so Sergey allowed her to go outside with the others. He promised that he and Diana would catch up with the remaining team members when they were sure that the cleanup squad had begun work. The Crimson Witch was satisfied with this answer, so she and several other people headed out. All the guys made a promise to each other that they would see each other outside. However, as soon as they left the dungeon, something strange immediately began to happen. It seemed as if the sky was covered with cracks and split into several parts. Our hero, Costa, immediately felt that something was wrong. He noticed a strange energy. The technical team also detected an anomaly. A fissure appeared right in the dungeon, and in terms of indicators, it was at the level of a catastrophe. Costa ran to the specialist and tried to find out whether his friends had time to leave the danger zone. The man immediately replied that most of the hunters had left the dungeon, but Sergey, Diana, and the cleanup group were still inside. After that, Costa immediately threw off his extra apron and gloves and rushed to his friend's aid. At this time, a young businessman, his secretary, and a cleanup team found themselves inside the rift. They all also felt that something was wrong. Not far from them, in front of the cave, they noticed a fissure of frightening force. Looking at it, the guys could immediately tell that they couldn't do it alone, and the cleanup group, which was even weaker, was truly horrified by what was happening. Everyone present was very scared because they did not know what awaited them ahead. However, something had to be done, so Sergey decided to take command. He decided to calm his guys down and ordered them all to prepare. In defense, he said that as soon as he and the secretary checked everything, everyone would head towards the exit if possible. He also convinced people that everyone outside should already know about the rift, so once things calmed down, they could assess the situation. He asked everyone present to remain calm and on behalf of the entire company, declared that he would not let anyone die there. Immediately after this, Sergey and Diana went to reconnoiter the situation. Sergey admitted that, no matter how much he ignored the strength of this fault, there definitely should have been a bladed panther there. The guy seemed absolutely right, because a huge, white, predatory cat came out to meet them. The young head immediately realized that this was a catastrophe on the level of the first great cataclysm. The last time this happened, there were more than 6,000 victims, and 2 entire islands were completely turned into ruins. The chance that the 2 of them could defeat her was close to 0, but the guy didn't expect to win anyway. He only believed and hoped that all his painful training had not gone in vain. They only needed to hold out until reinforcements arrived and the rest of the people were evacuated. At this time, our hero Costa had just made his way into the rift unnoticed. Finding himself in the dungeon, he immediately found himself on the battlefield. At that moment, Diana stepped forward to hold back the beast's attack, asking the head to cover her from the back. Costa thought that if Dasha had been here, they would not have been able to take control of the situation. However, if he intervened, he would then deal with the consequences. There, before him, urgently needed to figure out how to help his friends. At this time, literally with one blow, Diana went flying and crashed into a rock. The blow was so strong that the girl clearly suffered serious injuries. Sergey was horrified that even his strong friend was so easily injured. Now, he was the only one who needed to protect them both. Seeing such reckless actions of his new friend, Costa could no longer sit on the sidelines. He took the gift from the elder and threw it with all his strength right in the middle between the monster and Sergey. This caused the young director to jump to the side and lose his balance for a while. But then, a voice rang out in his head, ordering him to take the bow in his hands. The guy absolutely did not understand where it was coming from or what kind of bow he was talking about until he saw a weapon stuck in the ground in front of him. Only after this did the young man notice that the voice was coming from this very bow. He did not know that his friend Costa was speaking to him through it, ordering him to take up arms. Sergey had no choice but to obey this mysterious decree. Then, the voice ordered the guy to collect all his mana in one place, concentrate it in his hand, and turn it into the image of an arrow. Sergey himself did not understand how this happened, but as soon as he thought about the arrow, his energy also turned into it. The guy didn't hesitate for long, launching his arrow straight at the beast. The arrow flew quickly, hitting the huge panther right in the throat. It had such a strong impact that Sergey immediately lost his balance and fell to the ground. At this time, outside, the father of the young director was shouting that he did not care about the condition of the dungeon or any expenses. He only asked that his son be saved. Things weren't so bad at the rift. The panther was hit with just one blow. Sergey himself was shocked that he managed to defeat such a strong monster so easily. The guy lay on the ground and looked at the defeated enemy. At this time, the monster emitted its last death rattles, after which it completely stopped moving. The young master thought with joy that it was all over now. After that, he immediately remembered that he was not here alone. He rushed to his secretary, Diana, to check her condition. The head asked the girl if everything was okay with her, if her bones were intact, to which she replied that she was hurt, but overall feeling well. She actually looked much better than before. The girl, like Sergey himself, was amazed at how easily they dealt with this powerful monster, after which they could rejoice in their victory without any sense of danger. The young leader was glad that they had defeated the panther, although not without the help of some external circumstances. Although he spoke joyfully, Diana still realized that something was wrong. She turned out to be right, because literally, a moment later, without even having time to finish speaking, the guy began to fall back. He had lost too much of the strength he had put into that last blow. Fortunately, the secretary managed to catch her boss before he fell, after which the guy came to his senses a little. He was even able to sit up on his own. Diana noticed that the head of the company would definitely be pleased. She would tell him about what happened a couple of moments after this. A portal began to appear next to our heroes. A gate opened, allowing everyone locked inside the dungeon to leave. A whole crowd of doctors was already standing outside, and Sergey's father was worried about the condition of his son. He remembered the feeling he had when he was told that a rift on the scale of a catastrophe had arisen inside, and no one could contact the people who were stuck in it. At one point, the head of the corporation was even told that the chances of his son returning were 0. However, now the danger had passed, and all the hunters were returning home. Sergey and Diana had already left the dungeon and noticed the director nearby. The man immediately rushed to hug his son, which embarrassed him a little. First, he checked to see if everything was okay with his boy, if he was safe. Immediately after this, Sergey reported that he was able to deal with the panther that came out of the rift. Her corpse should have been enough to cover the losses of the guild, but everyone present was more amazed by the fact that the guy dealt with her himself. Diana only confirmed his words, saying that by that time she could no longer fight. Chairman's father noticed that his son had done a good job, but the reason for his excitement was not the panther. In fact, the total would be enough for him to return his son safe and sound. Costa and Dasha stood nearby and watched the reunion of relatives. A few days later, Sergey joyfully entered our hero's restaurant and presented him with great news. However, Costa was not so happy about this. He was rather amazed. The young president admitted that he decided to build an institute for the awakened on this site. He added that it was quite difficult to get permission to build outside of a designated residential area. But after his victory over the panther, he was gladly given permission. He also planned to change the location of the guild office, but promised not to touch the alley with his friend's restaurant. But the problem was that Costa hated loud noises. He hoped to live in this place like a lazy, retired billionaire. Sergey continued to say that he would like his friend to be in charge of food for the builders. However, the guy didn't even have time to agree when a bun flew into his face. Costa ordered his friend to turn up and get out of this territory, to which Dasha noticed that she and her mother had already agreed to this proposal. The girl said that the hero's mother really liked this idea, though lunch would last only 30 minutes. They would pay for the ingredients, and since there would be a lot of work, they would provide good compensation. After that, Costa had no choice but to agree with the proposal of his friend Sergey, who had already eaten the bun. At this time, the Guardian was enjoying the message that they had successfully completed 2 whole quests and received additional points for them. A whopping 65 million karma points were awarded, which allowed him to immediately rise to the 3rd level. This meant that now he could finally sign the student contract that he had been waiting for so long. It was late in the evening when someone shouted loudly throughout the entire restaurant and asked to take care of him. At this sound, sleepy Costa came out to check what was happening. He was not yet fully awake. His mouth was with the remains of saliva. His eyes were crusty. At the entrance to the restaurant, he saw a young girl with a backpack on her shoulders, who was talking with his mother. It turned out that this was Miss Olga, who would be helping them with the restaurant for some time. A couple of hours later, we see the main character sitting at the table and looking very gloomy. The keeper pesters the guy with questions about whether he was kicked out of the kitchen, to which the guy snaps and orders him to close his mouth. He remembers his last conversation with Sergey, when he said that they had a very small premises and should expand. So, he should buy the neighboring building, after which he immediately fulfilled his promise. Costa was shocked by such a huge number of tables for visitors. The guy was a little angry that everything was decided for him. He even thought that all rich people were like that. The hero did not fall for this. He knew that the Guardian had left last night and returned only at dawn. The wolf was annoyed that, due to Costa's bad mood, he was now taking it out on him. He actually admitted to going to Tyler the dwarf's home. He said that when Costa helped Soroa, the keeper increased his level, and now he could sign a student contract. The wolf explained that this is something like how, if Tyler gets karma points, then he gets them too, and his level increase has a good effect on Tyler himself. This is something like a connection in a team, to put it in more understandable terms. The Guardian also said that if Costa could regularly complete quests for him, then he would be able to completely cure his mother of her illness as soon as she reached level 5. The guy was very happy with this news because it meant that he could help his mother faster. While they were talking to each other, not noticing anything around, the door to the restaurant opened, and someone entered it. Costa had to pretend that he was actually just playing with his dog all this time. In fact, Diana and another man came to the guy because they wanted to turn this premises into a restaurant. He understood that everything depended on the business for which they bought the land, but still clarified what they needed from him. Diana explained that after surveying the entire area, they discovered a vegetable garden in the backyard of this restaurant. Perhaps it should be destroyed. Costa remembered that he had recently argued with Sergey about this. He didn't care about the safety of this place, but he was worried about the tree of the world. So he said that they grew vegetables there for the restaurant, so he would like to keep the garden. After which, Diana proposed to assign this entire territory the status of an eco-park. After this, the secretary said that as soon as they completed the design and expansion, they would begin construction. But Costa was confused by the man who was sitting next to them. It was Daniel, the foreman, who would oversee the construction. The girl brought him with her to introduce him personally. The guy was very cheerful despite his suffering appearance. He shook hands with Costa. The hero was surprised that such a young guy was already the head of a construction team, which embarrassed Daniel. Diana sighed and said that the guy used to work in their guild, but he did not have any unique ability, so he was reassigned to construction. Although he doesn't have a unique ability, he is still awakened, so he's able to work much more efficiently than ordinary people. Immediately after this, Costa learned that he had a quest to fulfill, a wish to return Daniel back to the guild. At the same time, the guy literally felt with his back how the Guardian was looking at him intently from behind. Our hero learned that the builder had the class of the largest warrior, which was very rare, especially since he had unusual abilities. A larger body meant that the more a person ate, the more fat he accumulated, his bone structure becoming extremely dense. Inflammation meant that stored fat and bone density would be used, and if he had features related to strength, speed, and mana, then his mana defense and recovery would increase. And the last compression power was the most useful feature. The guy only needed to reach the 8th level. Our hero understood that this guy had the potential to become really strong. At that moment in the kitchen, Olga and Costa's mother were having fun and cooking together. Diana continued to talk about how they needed to start with demolition. And since the equipment would be moving, the restaurant's residents might hear loud noises coming from that direction. Costa agreed, offered to feed all the workers, and at the same time get to know them. He said that such work was not a burden to him, and he would only be happy to help the guys. Everyone left, and after a while, night fell. But someone still did not sleep. Small gray mice with red eyes ran through the trash cans, squealing pitifully. One of them looked quite unusual because she had some kind of device attached to her body. This mouse behaved a little differently. It even stood on its hind legs and sniffed something, as if sensing danger. The animal immediately began to run. It rushed through the middle of this deserted street, as if its life depended on it. But in fact, the mouse had well-developed intuition, because all this time, a strange green cat was watching it. However, the animal did not manage to escape because the predator overtook its prey in one jump. The first thing he did was press the button on the device on the back of the mouse with his strange green paw and claws, after which there was a fairly strong explosion that caused pain to the animal. Licking its wounds, the cat reasoned out loud in a human voice that it was a self-destruction device. He walked literally a few meters, after which he stopped, sat on his hind legs, and began to glow. Suddenly, the same green wings began to appear on the cat's back. A few moments later, there was no trace of the animal left. Instead, a bird soared into the sky. After some time, construction was in full swing. Cranes and building materials were delivered. Workers scurried back and forth, laying out their plans and discussing construction. At this time, life in our hero's restaurant changed dramatically. Every day, it was visited by quite a lot of workers who really liked the food in this small establishment. The guy was only too happy to feed all these hard workers because he really liked to cook. But that didn't change the fact that he still needed to discover Daniel's secret ability and complete the quest. Therefore, between work, our hero ran and looked after his ward. This time, just as he wanted to come up and talk to the guy, something stopped him. In fact, it was one of the brigade leaders who ran up to Daniel and asked him about his well-being. It turned out that, just recently, Daniel was injured very seriously, which could even lead to a fracture, but there was not a scratch on him. Although the guy was not sure that Daniel was seriously injured, he dissuaded him and calmed him down. After that, Costa's short break ended, and he went back to the restaurant to cook. Olga was already serving the workers. Today's dish, pork in sweet and sour sauce. While the girl was serving everyone at dinner, our hero did not stop watching Daniel. He lost sight of him for a while, but after just a couple of minutes, he found him again. Costa climbed onto the roof of a building under construction and looked down at his charge. It even seemed to him that sometimes he was going overboard with all this surveillance. The guy was worried about his traumatic plan, but he knew. Costa knew that he wouldn't die from this anyway. He was ready to use his strength and test his ward, but he was suddenly interrupted by the appearance of Olga, who came close to Daniel. Costa was surprised that these two were hanging out together. He even thought that they were close. Just at this time, Daniel blushed deeply and sweated with excitement. He looked at the girl and asked her if she had thought about the proposal that he had recently made to her. She clearly did not want to continue this conversation because she hesitated at such a question. The girl looked straight at her colleague and said that this would be a little problematic for her. The guy immediately realized that there was no chance for him here, so he decided to silently agree. Olga continued to criticize him, saying that although he was a good and kind person, she was embarrassed by their large age difference. They also had differences in many other trivial matters, and if they couldn't even agree on this, then disputes would always arise over other issues. At that moment, the girl enthusiastically said that she hoped to quickly pay off her student loan. For some reason, Daniel began to apologize, which embarrassed the girl a little. Costa hid on the roof at this time, realizing that he had heard something unnecessary. He was embarrassed because he came only for the quest, but overheard someone else's personal life. The guy looked down again and saw that Daniel was a little upset, so he decided not to disturb him now. All he could think of was that it was better for him to leave these two alone for now. However, suddenly something changed in his surroundings. There was a strange sound. Costa realized that just a second ago, he had accidentally used force and moved the beams a little. He tried to warn the sweet couple below, even shouting to them to move aside. However, the girl was so interested in the conversation that she didn't even pay attention. But Daniel saw all the danger and reacted to it instantly. He immediately rushed towards the fragile girl, stretching his huge arms forward with all his strength. The guy pushed the girl in the opposite direction. Although her landing was not very soft, it still helped Olga avoid the falling beams. There was a deafening blow, after which the girl could not see anything for some time through the rising dust. After a couple of minutes, the clouds dissipated, presenting a terrible picture. At the loud, piercing, desperate cry of the girl, all the people in the area began to run toward the scene. Olga sat on her knees, and with tears in her eyes, tried to move the huge, heavy beams to the side. The girl kept calling Daniel, trying to understand whether he was still alive or no longer alive. Her hands were bruised. Her nails were broken. Although they were not serious wounds, she was still injured. After some time, the rest of the workers reached the scene of the incident, and Costa looked at the whole picture from top to bottom, realizing that it was his fault. At this time, builders used various methods and devices to free their colleague from under the rubble. Our hero was suspiciously calm and thought only that these sufferings and difficulties would become the basis for achieving his goal. A few minutes later, when the ruins were dismantled, a strange picture appeared before the eyes of the builders. Even Olga noticed that it had become suspiciously quiet around, so she decided to see what was happening. Everyone was amazed that instead of the plump Daniel, there was a very thin guy with his appearance lying on the ground. Just by this time, an ambulance arrived, quickly examined the guy, and took him to the hospital. A few days later, Sergey, Diana, and Costa came to visit him, worried about their foreman. On the hospital bed sat a rather thin and athletic guy with long hair. He turned to the window. Having heard his name, he turned his head toward the visitors and greeted the head of the company. From that moment on, everyone was in absolute shock because they expected to see their old, plump Daniel. A little later, the guy said that he thought it was his peculiarity. He squeezed hard and recalled that due to the fact that he constantly and continuously ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner, he could not get rid of weight. During rehabilitation therapy, his body only stopped getting thinner when he used a lot of force. He admitted that he even jumped off the roof once to make sure of this. Although it was reckless, it confirmed the guy's expectations. At that moment, the door to his room suddenly opened, and an excited Olga appeared at the rock. Daniel was very surprised by the presence of this girl here, and everyone present was also a little shocked by how exactly she appeared. At that moment, the girl herself stopped and threw all her things onto the floor. After that, with tears in her eyes, she rushed toward the hospital bed. She ran close to the patient, leaned on his bed, and asked if he was okay. Daniel was shocked that the girl even knew where he was. He wasn't worried about himself at all, so he decided to ask the redhead if everything was okay with her. The girl cried the whole time and only said that her hand was completely unimportant now. They continued to bicker cutely with each other, while our hero, in the background, made bunnies from red apples. After this, Sergey decided to intervene in their conversation. Costa, as the head of their company and employer, was amazed that the guy had mastered the hunter class only thanks to his powers. This was his real appearance. In fact, she was worried that the guy had lost so much weight due to severe operations. After this, Daniel asked his boss if he could show him one more feature. He then freed one hand from his long sleeve and extended it forward. The guy began to concentrate all his power in one place, and gradually his hand began to glow, acquiring a purple hue. Daniel said that he initially thought it was just a morphosis, but in fact it was a slightly different feeling, as if something ready to explode at any moment bit into his hand. It was like there was a magical force around him, even though he couldn't use it. Costa thought that its potential usefulness and opportunity were simply amazing. At that time, he made a butterfly from a red apple. Daniel continued to say that, with such a feature, he would be able to do a lot. Sergey stopped him, saying that he understood perfectly well what he was getting at. Therefore, he invited the guy to return to the guild as a full member. He also offered to help Daniel better study his new ability. The guy immediately agreed, saying that he would be very pleased to work in the guild again. Immediately after this, Olga became a little embarrassed and asked to talk to her about what they had recently discussed. Daniel immediately understood what she was talking about and became embarrassed in front of strangers. However, before he could finish speaking, the girl took a full lungful of air and screamed loudly. She came close and admitted to the guy that she agreed to be his girlfriend. They were in a rather awkward situation. The girl continued to ask for only one date. Daniel was surprised because earlier she had told him that she was very busy, but all this was only because she was in the guild and had to work hard to see the guy. The girl told him her entire short life story. In fact, she admitted that she had never been in a relationship before, so she wanted to fall in love at first sight, as happened in many films and books. While the couple was explaining to each other, our hero in the background made a whole cake out of red apples. Olga ended her speech by saying that all this love at first sight stuff didn't really suit her, so she invited Daniel to learn everything from scratch with her and go on a first date. After some time, everyone began to leave the hospital for their homes. Just at this time, Costa thought that Diana looked quite distracted today, so he went up to talk to her. However, the girl was clearly not in the mood for conversation, so she politely said goodbye to him. Of course, Costa couldn't just take her word for it, but he decided to let her go for now. Instead of talking, our guy decided to simply follow Sergey's secretary. He was very surprised by the place the girl went to immediately after visiting the hospital. It turned out that she went straight to the guild's training center. Diana calmly walked up to the horizontal bar, attached her work pass, and walked on. Costa couldn't just get into this building, so he approached and asked if he could arrange a tour for the awakened ones. Immediately after this, he was registered and given a temporary pass. The guy just managed to go inside in time to notice how the girl changed clothes and went into some room. The sign on the door said that this was the guild's training room. Costa used his invisibility skill and quietly went inside until the doors closed completely. There, he saw Diana standing alone in the middle of an empty room, inside of which her power was growing. At this time, the girl was already fully prepared for battle, reaching for her sword that hung on her belt. Then, with a lightning movement, she pulled it out of its sheath and pointed it forward. She grabbed the handle with both hands and took a defensive position. To begin with, the girl practiced the most basic movements with a sword. Costa watched her and thought that her movements were good and that she was not deprived of talent. After that, he recalled the last case of the use of magical powers, be it Sergey with a bow, or even Daniel's recently discovered new excellent ability. It took him quite a long time to compare all these facts. Costa thought that the girl trains every day because she awakens so many people from her environment. After that, he waited until the end of the training and quietly left the center, heading home to feed his guardian. The guy was sitting on the floor on his knees in front of the wolf, and his eyes literally glowed. The keeper looked at the huge portion of food on his plate and immediately thought that this was definitely some kind of bribe. Costa fell in front of him in a low bow, saying that he had no hidden intentions. He admitted that during the quest, he helped Sergey and Daniel, but did not help Diana in any way. Recently, the guild announced the possibility of increasing their rank, so the guy thought that the girl was so upset because everyone around her except her had grown as hunters. Costa asked the keeper if he could help someone without directly influencing them. After that, he asked what method he should use to increase the hunter's rank. The keeper advised him to listen to the voice in his head. It could give clues. After which, he began to eat. Costa admitted that the girl is capable and her equipment is quite good. So, if she continues in the same spirit, she will be able to rise to the 5th level of swordsmanship. However, Diana could recognize his voice, so he asked the keeper to help him with at least some resources, although the guy used to say that he did not want to help others. In fact, for him, it was something like a habit. He wanted to help without personal involvement. The guardian did not think for long about this request from his new acquaintance. After some thought, he decided to give a final answer. He promised to help if a quest appeared for Diana because people have something like destiny. Meeting someone like Costa is also a kind of fate, and a little extra luck. The hero noticed that these words sounded as if they were being spoken by some stubborn old man. After that, the keeper and Costa went back to the training center to see the girl in action. They used the invisibility skill and watched her from afar, but they didn't have to wait long because, just at that time, a quest for Diana appeared. They needed to increase her level in the next 7 days. After which, the keeper promised that he would do it himself. The guardian promised to help the girl with the help of telepathy, so Costa could go about his business for now and check back later. After such strange behavior, the guy noticed that the guardian's actions very much reminded him of a sunder. However, he still decided not to interfere with the wolf doing his job, so he went home. There, he decided to change clothes and go to the conference to which Sergey had invited him. The guy quickly had a snack and said goodbye to his mother, after which he went to the company. The woman was glad that her son had been quite busy lately and had even found new friends. At this time, the opening ceremony of a new office was taking place in the conference hall of the Shinoa Guild. Quite a lot of people had gathered there who could cover the event in the media. Several individual journalists were invited, who had already set up their cameras and were ready to film. Costa came almost to the opening itself, so he was amazed by the large number of people. He decided not to go down, but to stay alone on the balcony and watch everything from above. And just in time, because at that very moment, the poems and the speaker came out on stage. It turned out to be Sergey, who immediately thanked everyone who came to the opening ceremony of the new office and decided to personally see the birth of a new project. Costa sat on the balcony and thought only that, from afar, his friend really looked like the son of a very rich family. Meanwhile, Sergey continued to say that along with the move of the guild office, they planned to continue recruiting new people into it, giving priority to the potential use of their own characteristics and honing their skills, rather than selecting candidates only by the current rank of their magical power. This greatly surprised the specialists gathered here. The chairman snapped his fingers, drawing attention back to himself. As a first step on this path, he announced that today, what was happening was not only the opening of a new office for the Shinoa Guild, but the creation of a private educational institution for hunters. Immediately after this, a forest of hands appeared among the people who wanted to ask questions. Sergey chose one of them and asked him to voice his question. One reporter rose from his seat, first congratulating the company on establishing a new office. He then said that it was previously mentioned that the company was opening an educational institute. He clarified whether the criteria for admission to the institute would differ from the worldwide standards for measuring the magic rank of an awakened person. Sergey confirmed this information, adding that the criteria for admission to the institute would be the same as the criteria of the guild itself. Then, the guy looked out from the whole crowd at one more person who wanted to ask something. He addressed a young lady in a formal suit and glasses who was sitting in the third row. The girl had seen a report that said that during an unexpected awakening, Sergey had heard a strange voice. It was thanks to him that they were able to kill the snow panther. Because of this story, many low-ranking awakened people gained hope. More and more hunters, who were quite weak before, went to recheck their ranks. However, it is worth assuming that this could only happen to the head of the Shinoa Guild. Therefore, she was interested in whether the educational institutes would not be just a simple squeeze of money from the dreamy, awakened ones. Costa was amazed that all the reporters asked such tricky questions. On the other hand, he understood that such questions did not arise out of nowhere. He understood that everything initially became possible only because of his help. However, Sergey was clearly not at a loss from such complex questions. He thanked the reporter and said that such thoughts were quite understandable because he himself constantly asks himself this question. It is possible that a miracle happened to him, and maybe he was so lucky only once in his life. However, he saw this opportunity, so he decided to grab it with all his might. Such a strange wording of the chairman's answer surprised Costa. Little did the girl reporter expect such a detailed answer from the head of the company. At that moment, Sergey called an invited guest onto the stage, which surprised Costa. Everyone present was also amazed at what appeared before their eyes. In fact, this invited guest turned out to be Daniel. He stood next to Sergey and amazed everyone with his enormous size. Compared to him, the guests were clearly impressed by this huge man. Sergey continued to talk about how Daniel was one of the first members of the guild, and that they could only find all the information about him by reading a couple of articles from that time. He admitted that the awakened C rank was a label that constantly followed him, as well as Sergey himself. He then asked to bring to the stage the very bow that helped him in the last battle. Costa was surprised that these guys were filled with such determination. At this time, on stage, Sergey defiantly took a bow without arrows and seemed to pull the string. On the other side of the stage, Daniel prepared to repel the attack. He took in as much air as possible into his lungs. After that, the guy also stood up, ready for battle. It took literally a couple of moments for Sergey to begin gathering all his strength together. Just like last time, it was not difficult for him to transform it into an arrow. After that, the guy took good aim and warned Daniel that he was about to shoot at him. All the assembled reporters and guests were horrified by what was happening on stage. Literally, a couple of moments passed, and after a short sigh, Sergey released the bowstring. An arrow of magical power immediately burst out of his bow and went toward its target. Some people even screamed in horror, thinking something traumatic would happen before their eyes. Even the cameramen left their cameras and looked at the stage with all their eyes. At this time, the arrow reached its target and hit Daniel right in the chest. Sergey calmly lowered his bow and exhaled, saying that everything went well. At this moment, a cloud of smoke rose on the opposite side of the stage, hiding everything that was happening behind it. Costa came to the dwarven village and looked for his old friend at his house. The old man was surprised by his arrival and asked him to warn him next time, although he had said before that he could come at any time. After that, the old man laughed and said that all this was said out of emotion. He was just heading to the workshop, so Costa asked to go with him. The old man agreed to go there together since the young guy wanted to look at it. After this, the keeper suggested splitting up. He himself wanted to go to Tyler. The hero was even glad about this course of events and smiled very much. The guardian looked at him and said that even without completing the quests, he was not so weak that any person would take care of him. At this time, the old man was completely oblivious to the fact that two people next to him were almost ready to fight. After that, the company went to the workshop, which was filled to the brim with various types of weapons. Some dwarves were just now engaged in forging new products. A huge magical furnace was flooded, which helped them in their work. The guy admitted that it was quite stuffy in the workshop, just as he remembered the last time. The elder announced a short break for all workers, but Costa could not stand it and even took off his shirt. After which, the old man noticed that an ordinary person would not be able to enter this room because of the heat, as the average temperature rose to 80 dec. After that, he summoned a huge piece of magic stone from behind the portal and asked Costa to make a shield out of it. The elder was delighted with the appearance of this stone because it was an excellent material that would never be seen on Earth. Costa admitted that he received it after a battle with that huge panther. He remembered that the world had really tried him, as he had never encountered such a monster in the spirit realm. The elder looked at this huge stone and said that his old friend's request would be fulfilled. But he admitted that this metal is too tough for the local equipment, because to create an account, you need a very high temperature. But due to the structure of the earth and the absence of the spirit of fire here, their capabilities were very limited. Costa thought for a minute and concluded that they just needed a spirit of fire, like that cute mole. However, the elder noted that such a spirit of the earth was lucky to be born in this world thanks to the tree, and it was unlikely that they would be so lucky again. In addition, they also needed a place that could withstand such temperatures. Costa was horrified at how expensive these premises could cost them. Costa was actually indignant that people were so obsessed with money. However, he admitted that in their situation there was still no choice. Just at that moment, one of the workers called the elder over, and they talked about something for a short time. The old man asked Costa to look around himself, but he needed to go away for a while on business. The guy just had time to think about where he could get such a room. For this reason, he even decided to turn to his guardian, who had just returned to his guardian. He didn't look very happy, but after a while, he admitted that he had an idea. These words were clearly significant. Given with difficulty, the keeper still said that the fiery fox could help them. Costa was surprised that this divine beast was still on Earth. However, the keeper also added that the fox was very broken, which greatly surprised our hero. The guardian added that the fox's core would give them the required temperature with extra reserve. However, there was one thing that confused the great divine wolf. The guardian clearly did not want to continue this conversation, but he understood that he had no choice, so he stayed silent for a little longer. Then he added that the fox was broken and devoid of reason. He was once the first guardian apostle named Ralph, who fought alongside him during the Great Cataclysm and exhausted almost all of his magical and physical power. He gave too much, and it could not help but leave a mark on him. Costa listened carefully to everything that the furry guardian told him. Then, he decided that he should see everything with his own eyes. He admitted that they would still have to go to him to steal the fox's core. After that, the guy squatted down and began to think about their further plan of action. The guardian said that the fox was in the west, in a black valley where there was a mountain overflowing with demonic energy. There was not a ray of life, giving light there. That cave was teeming with all kinds of monsters. The guy was delighted that he now had the coordinates of Ralph's location, and he decided to go there immediately. He grabbed the keeper by the scruff of the neck, pushed off the ground with force, and jumped straight in the direction that the guardian had indicated to him. After some time, they landed not far from the required location. The divine wolf even felt a little seasick from such chaotic movement. However, he quickly came to his senses and began to look around. There was something to see because the whole ground was strewn with dead animals. All of this was done by one huge fiery fox, whose mouth was covered in blood. It stood over the small, lifeless animal corpses right in front of them. The guardian was surprised that his former apostle had already come to this. He looked at what was happening, and it seemed to him that he had guessed why reason did not return to Ralph. After all, when divine beasts who do not need food become weak, they instinctively begin to look for something to eat. If they try to replenish their magical power by absorbing monsters, it leads to only one outcome. Demonic energy is like poison. So if a divine beast swallows a lethal dose, it will suffer an overdose of energy. But before he even had time to finish his sentence, an attack of hot fire immediately flew at him. It went behind him and exploded somewhere behind him, destroying everything in its path. If Costa had not managed to dodge at the right moment, he would already be dead. The guy was amazed that the fiery fox detected his presence, despite the fact that the guy hid. However, he was absolutely not going to give him time to think about further actions. Preparing for the next attack in this hot ball of flame, the guy managed to see something strange. He was amazed that divine beasts were using demonic energy instead of divine power. However, at the same time, Costa needed to defend himself, so he also began to release his energy outward. He had very little time, since the beast had absolutely no intention of waiting for him to prepare. Costa barely had time to create a shield and protect himself and the guardian from the blow. The wolf only shouted that the fox could not think straight now, so whenever possible, they just needed to take away its core without causing harm. Costa was glad that the guardian was so worried about his former comrade, but noticed that he had not even done anything yet. He also added that if they left him just like that, it could be a disaster if he becomes a monster. At this time, the powers of the fiery fox only increased in volume. Even the ice that Costa used to freeze his flames began to heat up. With one quick movement toward the guardian, our hero threw him aside as far as possible. After that, the shield was destroyed, and the attack achieved its goal. The guardian stood aside and just watched as all this flame fell on Costa. He was horrified that his new friend could die just like that. However, it was too early to give up, because our hero was experienced in this kind of battle. His clothes may have been burned, but he himself escaped serious consequences. At the last moment, the guy applied force to his legs, which allowed him to jump high into the air. He admitted that the fox's fire was indeed powerful, which was to be expected from someone who had absorbed such a large amount of demonic energy. Costa decided to first get away from there to somewhere far away, and then think about how he could get the core. However, before he even had time to finish his thought, the fox moved into a new phase of the offensive. While still in flight, our hero began to be surrounded on all sides by tubes of flame. Therefore, he had to exert quite a lot of force in order to summon a new defensive technique. A whole huge horde of water appeared around the guy, which developed at his order. At this moment, the fiery tubes headed straight toward our hero. They crashed into the huge body of water with which the guy protected himself. This gave Costa a little time to land calmly on the ground and take a short break. It was at this moment that The hero finally abandoned the idea of preserving the entire forest intact. Even through such a dense shield of water, one of the attacks managed to break through and almost hit our hero. Even such a small blow could cause quite a huge amount of damage. Behind Costa's back, the guy noticed that when the body is absorbed by foreign demonic energy, this divine beast is able to demonstrate enormous power. At this moment, our hero was called by the guardian, who had been standing at a distance all this time. The guy wanted to protect his new friend, so he ordered him not to approach, but the guardian reminded him that now Ralph should not be perceived as an ordinary living divine beast. In his current state, he was ready to use any methods and means to achieve his goal. The hero didn't quite understand what exactly the fiery fox wanted to achieve, but he took note of it. The beast suddenly summoned even more of its power and began to approach our hero. It even seemed to Costa that its whole body had increased somewhat in size. At that moment, he realized that the fox wanted to burn the entire territory to the ground. So, in desperation, he rushed towards the guardian to protect him. The guy clearly didn't have time to run, so he decided to use his magical power. He imprisoned the guardian in a small space that was completely filled with his mana. Then he placed him in a ball and sent it high into the sky. At this moment, because Costa was no longer using the name of the guardian, the fox's memory began to revive. Memories of wanting to protect his friend, his master. Making sure that the keeper was safe, Costa went on the offensive. He opened the portal again, intending to graft his weapon from it. This time, it turned out to be his favorite huge sword, which the dwarves had once made for him. Ralph did not stop watching our hero for a second. He only became even more furious because he couldn't get hold of some pathetic person. This next boost made our hero dodge even more often. Costa stepped a little to the side in order to gain a little time for the attack. He only had a few seconds to come up with his next strategy. The guy grabbed the hilt of the sword with both hands, swinging it with all his might. Now, he could only wait for the moment when the fox would come close enough to him, after which Costa dealt him a cutting blow, applying a huge amount of force. The guy thought that this attack would have at least some effect. However, he immediately noticed that there was something strange about the fox's paws that he had just cut. Literally a moment later, the paws reunited as if there had been no injury. The guy realized that no physical residue would work on the fiery fox. At this time, he only in vain allowed the animal to get even closer to him. He was already practically inside the mouth of this huge monster. Costa tried to unclench the jaws with his huge sword, but failed. The huge, fiery fox sent him flying with such force that no normal person would have been able to survive for long. As if she felt something, our hero's mother decided to listen to her feelings. Her motherly heart told her something, but the woman thought that she had imagined it. Her intuition did not let her down, because at that moment, Costa was really fighting a very strong opponent. The guy barely came to his senses after such a strong blow from the fiery fox. This was almost the only divine beast left alive, but with all the demonic energy absorbed, the guy was not sure that he could stop it without killing it. Costa realized that he couldn't get infected with him at half his strength. He needed to take the enemy seriously, but he was still worried about the guardian's request. At this time, the fiery fox began to summon a new technique, which was formed into a ball. It was a clot of energy, the very core that Costa himself was hunting for. The guy looked at the once sacred animal and thought that he should spend as much energy as possible now, so that it would be easier to defeat him later. He hoped that the fiery fox would pour all the demonic power into this core. Ralph didn't need anyone's orders, so he himself directed one of his most powerful attacks towards our hero. The guy came up with the idea to cut this clot of energy with his sword, so he now concentrated only on delivering one precise and clear blow. The core kept approaching our hero with enormous force. At the last moment, the guy realized that he couldn't cut it, so he simply beat it back to the fox. Now, the guy realized that it was definitely a core, but he couldn't understand why it was so big. Even the color was too muddy, as if it did not belong to the fiery fox at all. At this time, the animal seized the moment and attacked the hero with physical force. The guy barely managed to put his sword under the teeth of the huge beast. Meanwhile, right above them, a clot of energy continued to absorb demonic power. The sky became darker and darker from so many dark forces in it. Costa realized that they were both in danger and urgently needed to leave this place. However, the fox held the sword in his teeth and would not let go, so the hero had to come up with another plan. Instead of taking out his sword and running away, he decided to use force and simply move the fox along with him. Of course, the animal didn't like this, so shaking its head, the fiery fox made the guy get off the ground. It was at this moment, as they fought fiercely, that a huge stream of energy shot out from the core. Both Costa and Ralph were thrown with force in opposite directions. A moment later, Costa came to his senses and decided to look at the place where the cannonball fell. Literally, a few centimeters from his feet, a huge black crater was punched into the ground. Costa had a hard time seeing from this place how things were going, so he decided to get up and see what was happening. Before he could do this, a huge stream of energy fell on him from behind. The guy managed to jump away and then turn around, running into the attack. The fox did not waste time while the guy came to his senses. It decided to attack. It was still hard for Costa, but he was glad that the demonic energy had already weakened greatly. Even though he still had to put in a huge amount of effort just to dodge, there was light at the end of the tunnel. The guy dodged, delivering small blows, exhausting his opponent. Some strange feeling overcame our hero. He turned around and some unusual energy came from exactly the place where the core fell. Now, the guy managed to look at it closer and clearly realized that something was wrong. He knew that it was impossible to reach such a state by simply eating meat with demonic energy for a couple of months. The guy was sure that the fox's core was forcibly filled with dark energy because it was the embodiment of the soul of a divine beast. If the core is destroyed, it would be a huge loss for the beast. If you kill it, the core will be destroyed. The guy tried to guess what kind of demon could do this. The hero heard the voice of the fiery fox who wondered if he knew Carnis. Costa was amazed that this beast still retained the remnants of its sanity. The guy decided to check this version, so he asked the fox why he was asking him about this, to which the beast replied that this was the only name that remained in his memory. As soon as he thought about it, his head began splitting. At this time, the guardian, whom he had been looking for all this time, looked down at him. He was now in a different form and was enclosed in a protective bubble. Gradually, he came closer and closer to the fiery fox, who raised its head up and looked at him. He called out to Ralph, trying to talk to him and help him recognize him. The fox froze for a while as if listening to his words. Costa decided to take advantage of the moment and finish what he started. Since the guardian had bought some time, he had to use it wisely. The guy immediately turned around and headed straight for the hole in the ground. He extended his hand towards the core and tried to grab it. Just when the guy thought he was about to catch it, something went wrong. The guardian continued to call his former friend, trying to reach him, but instead, the huge fiery fox only opened its mouth wide. It instantly slammed shut, locking the guardian along with the ball between its jaws. Immediately after this, all the demonic energy that had been accumulating in him all this time began to come out of the fox. Now, instead of a small white dog, a huge white wolf appeared before him. Animals that were once friends were now standing opposite each other. Now, having decided in his true form, the guardian tried to talk with his former ward. However, the fox did not recognize him, whether in his small form or in his truly large one. Instead, the fiery animal simply grabbed the guardian's throat with force. Ralph knocked him to the ground, crushing him with his entire body on top, immobilizing him. The guardian was angry and frustrated that his charge could not remember him. However, he still needed to continue defending against his attacks. So, our wolf used water magic, which made the fox jump away. The guardian literally built a shield of water with all his paws, which forced him to let go. Afterward, He jumped up and began frantically calling out to our hero, Costa. He said that the core was half of the soul of the divine beast, so if they won, they would be able to return at least half to it. At this time, our hero fought desperately to free himself from the core. The guy literally extended his hand inside the core but could not do anything else with it. Meanwhile, the fiery fox was becoming more and more crazy every minute. His grin became even more menacing, and his entire mouth was covered in blood. The guardian looked at his former friend and realized that he was in great pain. He literally watched the demonic energy condensing behind him. The fire beast still did not give up, summoning more and more black demonic flames. In response to this, the guardian summoned light drops of water that could resist fire. Our heroes, at this time, tried to deal with the core. The deeper it sunk, the stronger the recoil. If the demonic power was burned from within, it could destroy the core. While in this state, the beast was in torment, and at the same time, the guy himself still had to simultaneously dodge all the attacks of both animals. The guy was angry because he had put in such painstaking work, and these two animals acted as if he wasn't even there. The hero tried to concentrate in order to set fire to the foreign body and not lose control. He was very afraid that the core would split, but the keeper said that there was nothing to worry about. After all, in fact, the core of this embodiment of the soul is a fiery fox. As long as it is not destroyed entirely, the core can regenerate and return to its previous form. After hearing this, Costa decided to get away from the two animals. He climbed onto one of the tall stone columns that were located in the forest. After the keeper gave permission to break the core, the guy's task became much easier. Now, he did not worry about the safety or integrity of his soul. He could apply more force. At this time, the fox began to feel that something was wrong with his core. Costa had already found the right place. All he had to do was literally apply a little more force. But at that moment, the fiery fox turned his attention to him. The fox decided to remove the source of pain that was causing him to suffer, so he sent a huge stream of energy directly to the place where our hero was. At the very last moment, the guardian pushed off from the ground and covered our guy with his body. Of course, Costa saw what happened, so he was worried about his friend. The keeper only said not to worry about him but to get on with his work. However, he asked the guy to hurry up because even his strength was not that much. After that, Costa concentrated even more, putting in the rest of his strength. It was this last movement that allowed him to finally break the core's defenses and shatter it. Immediately after this, the guy was able to exhale calmly, sweat still rolling down his face. Our hero held in his hand a small fragment of the fiery fox's core. Immediately after this, all the demonic energy of the beast disappeared at once, and he fell down. Literally at the last moment, the keeper managed to substitute his shoulder and soften the blow. Only now could the keeper stop worrying about his old friend. After some time, Costa came down from the cliff and ran toward his keeper. The guy immediately asked if everything was okay with the fiery fox. The keeper replied that he was simply lost in knowledge, but not for long. So he would wake up soon, but in fact he was more worried about the body of the guardian himself. What was more important was that the wolf was grateful to the man for the return of his comrade. He even touched his forehead with his nose and promised to get better soon. After this, Costa demonstrated to his friend that the core had split into several parts. The keeper was satisfied with this situation. In fact, he thought there would be even more damage. These fragments were enough. The fox would be able to recover if he did not absorb demonic beasts in the future. Just at this time, Ralph stretched sweetly and began to wake up. He had just recovered from a long sleep and still didn't fully understand what had happened. The beast was terribly surprised to see his old guardian comrade right in front of him. He was in real shock that his master had come with a man. After this, the wolf asked his ward how he was feeling. The fox was a little confused by what had happened and did not know how best to explain. Then he began to talk about how he thought everything that was happening was just a dream. He admitted that he had been consumed by this darkness a long time ago. He thought that he was deep in his dreams and that it was already too late. He believed this so much that he would even believe his master had forgotten him. After which, the keeper looked at his ward and said that he could never forget him in this world. The fiery fox replied that he wanted to believe it, but it betrayed the meaning of his life, in which no one would lend him a helping hand. The hero stood nearby and watched the explanations of the two old friends. After this, the keeper invited his ward to go with him. This proposal made the fiery fox very happy because he no longer needed to be alone. But even so, he decided to refuse this generous offer and remain completely where he was. The guardian assumed that he was worried about the rest and restoration, but the fox only slowly raised his head and looked at the night sky. Then he replied that he first needed to restore everything that he had managed to destroy. He said that he could not let the land where the divine beasts live dry up and die. Then he looked at Costa and asked if he had come for his core. The guy tried to deny it at first, but then admitted everything. The fox noticed that his words contradicted each other. Everything was too obvious. He added that, on any other day, with his character, he would have knocked him down and killed him long ago, tearing him in half. But today he helped him, so he forgives him and gives him life. He also noted that even now, the guy is capable of tearing apart a weakened divine beast if he just wishes it. People have an evil nature, so with such power, he would not spare him, even if it cost the fox his life. However, the owner intervened and said that it was he who brought this man here. This is a brave man who will protect the earth and take the place of the guardian. After this, the fox realized that this was the great man about whom the owner had spoken in predictions several thousand years ago. After that, he no longer looked at the person that way. Although he expressed disappointment, the fox noted that he does not believe in a specific person, but in humanity as a whole. Either way, he was going to stay in this place and focus on recovery. Some hostility immediately arose between the fox and our hero, Costa. The guardians returned to. Their earthly appearance promised that even years later, he would definitely return to pick up his comrade. After that, our heroes headed home, leaving the fire beast to rebuild everything it had destroyed. In parting, the keeper added that even if the whole world disappeared at once, he would disappear, preserving the memory of his comrade. He promised that he would never be able to forget him, no matter what happened to them. Ralph was delighted with such words from his master. It gave him true joy. After these words, he gladly allowed our heroes to take the remains of his core. Olga had a hard time getting up because she had to carry a lot of things. Her beloved guide, Daniel, turned around at the girl's words and noticed that it was hard for her. Instantly, he ran up to the girl to help her carry her thing. Olga was upset that the guy was not caring for her enough. It was an ordinary quarrel between two lovers, which happens to everyone. This situation was witnessed by the head of the company where both of them worked. He asked forgiveness for his subordinate because he carried him with him everywhere. However, the girl did not obey the boss at all. On the contrary, she only shouted at him for being so overworked. She demanded a day off for her boyfriend, and also recalled the dangerous performance that time. Everything really worked out with a demonstration of Daniel's strength. His body absorbed the energy and took on its best form. The girl was worried about the fact that in the morning she worked in a restaurant and in the afternoon she disappeared with business at the guild. She demanded a day off, or at least one day when she and Daniel could be together, but he covered her mouth with his hand. Everyone understood that this was not serious at all, so they were not angry. Immediately after this, the driver shouted from the passengers that he needed to leave, so everyone in the group rushed to take their seats. At this time, an abandoned temple stood in the middle of the desert. In its center, there was a dark entrance that allowed one to enter a place never seen before. A small green mouse crept there, unnoticed through a gap in the floor. She quietly watched what was happening inside. This strange green mouse had a small camera on its neck that recorded everything that happened. The werewolf looked at what was in front of his eyes and could not understand what these creatures were up to. Very small people rushed back and forth with tools in their hands. A beautiful, dark-haired, slender woman commanded them menacingly. She was worried that the gate was almost completed, but Pasha had not finished yet. The girl was thinking that everyone was working too slowly. At that moment, someone called her from behind. Another little man with glasses ran up to her and said that the gate ball was completed. Risa looked at the small sphere in his hands and was very happy about it. Then she pulled herself together and praised Pasha for doing such a difficult job. She added later that after this, she simply had to treasure him. This cute boy was incredibly embarrassed by such open praise. Risa did not think that on Earth it would take only 3 months to create a ball, but now she held it in her hands. She added that this was only thanks to such a master as Asha. Thanks to these words, the boy added that in the future, he would be able to make an even more effective device. He said that he understood the essence in general terms, so it would take him about 2 months. However, the girl turned her eyes and said that Pasha, with his abilities, would be enough in a month. The guy was again embarrassed by such praise and promised to try to cope in a month. After that, the girl smiled joyfully and said that this was exactly how she appreciated him. After that, Pasha went back to his laboratory and Risa stood, joyfully waving goodbye to him. She did this until the guy disappeared around the corner, after which the smile disappeared from her face. The girl straightened her hair. She was unhappy that she had to constantly persuade and praise the dwarves so that they would at least do something, although she understood that, for a traitor like her, there was no option to be picky. The girl slowly approached the gate step by step and thought that she would not have another chance. She came close to the stand and realized that even if she had created a gate without the key and battery, she would simply have wasted her energy. She took the ball in her hand and extended it toward this strange installation. She mentally prayed that this would help them achieve what they wanted. As soon as the ball entered the groove, a gate immediately opened in front of the girl. She was incredibly glad that she had managed to do everything right. The girl took the key back and thought that it could be used about 9 more times. She hid the ball in a small bag and secured it to her belt. After that, she turned to someone and ordered them to go out and not crowd in the dark. Immediately after these words, boys and girls began to appear out of nowhere. They looked exactly like Risa, but had different hair and outfits. She told them that she was able to achieve everything only thanks to the dwarves and resources. She also added that they all knew that they had an unenviable position, but today's success should have changed a lot. Her subordinates looked down at the ground. The girl listened carefully to her every word. She stood confidently in front of her followers and talked about their successes. Risa added that today she was more worried than she expected. Her subordinates did not even immediately understand what the girl was talking about. Literally, a second after this, the girl sharply looked up somewhere. She directed the force of her blow to one of the inconspicuous corners in the wall. After that, it was destroyed. The girl discovered a green mouse spy. She was furious that she hadn't noticed him sooner. She used her power again, trying to get the spy, however. Right before her eyes, the green mouse suddenly sparkled brightly. Literally a second later, huge wings appeared. It rushed right next to Risa, hitting her painfully somewhere in the waist area. The girl immediately noticed that this strange green bird had stolen her bag with the ball. The result of their long, painstaking work was stolen by some spy. Risa understood that this could not be allowed at all. She was once again convinced that it was indeed the bag from her belt, after which she ordered to immediately mobilize all forces and find the green eagle. Her subordinates were not supposed to act alone, but to attack in groups. Immediately after this, all the boys and girls gathered here took up arms. They were in excellent physical shape, so they rushed in pursuit of the green bird. This werewolf was in the same group as Dasha, our hero's friend. Although he was unable to gather evidence, the situation was quite serious due to the fact that this group managed to build the gate. They were hunting him, and at that moment, the eagle was only thinking about what catastrophe would happen if all the gates were activated. At the moment when he was already pressed into a corner, the eagle began to shine brightly again. In the next moment, a huge green paw squeezed the guy's throat with one blow. He was slammed against the wall so hard that it left a huge dent. The green hand disappeared, but the white-haired man still could not move after such a blow. The huge animal was now leaning on all its paws and trying to run as far as possible. Due to its size, the gorilla could not be afraid of pursuit but simply threw enemies to the side. Now, all his pursuers were afraid to attack him openly. They tried to avoid a direct confrontation with the same monster. Risa saw the state her warriors were in after meeting this animal. She realized that the gorilla was trying to break through from the outside of the sector. Therefore, the girl summoned a huge black bow with her power. Then she added a black arrow to it, which was created from the same energy. She ordered all her subordinates to gather on the opposite side and block the spy's path. After that, The girl carefully took aim directly at the fleeing creature. She picked the right moment, held her breath for a while, then released the arrow. It rushed straight to its target with lightning speed, hitting the green-furred spy right in the middle of the thigh. Severe, piercing pain made the animal scream sharply. At this time, even more warriors managed to run toward the call of their commander. Risa ordered them to chase the gorilla because with such a wound it could not run far. At this time, the spy hung the ball around his neck and tried to run away with all his might. He already felt that this wound would not go unnoticed by him. He understood that he needed to get out but saw no light anywhere. The wound occupied more and more of his thoughts with each passing second. His leg also gradually ceased to obey him, and his consciousness became clouded. His vision became worse, as if he was about to collapse from fatigue. He tried his best just to get the message to his headquarters. Suddenly, a very bright light appeared right in front of his eyes. For a few seconds, it even caused the werewolf to go blind and lose his orientation. Immediately after this, he realized that he had fallen into a trap that had been prepared for him. Right in front of him, there stood guards with weapons in their hands, guarding the exit. Above them and on the sides were archers who were ready to shoot at any second. And most importantly, the commander of this detachment came out in front of him. Risa stood and looked down at the driven green animal. She only doubted that the spy had nowhere else to run. It seemed to her that now he must give up because there was simply no other way out. To her surprise, the huge gorilla only smiled triumphantly. Instead, the girl did not expect such a reaction at all, so she could not understand what he was going to do. The spy, with the last of his strength, told her that he had not lost yet. After which, the huge green gorilla again glowed with bright light. This time, this transformation quickly caused the entire destroyed temple to shake, because delivering a message to the guild was more important than saving one's own life. Risa stood and looked in front of her, amazed. The cornered animal did not give up. Instead, the beast began to glow with bright green light again, indicating that it was ready to take on a new form. The last transformation was of such incredible proportions that the entire structure began to shake and threaten to collapse. At this time, Costa was somewhere in the middle of the forest and heard a strange sound. The keeper was surprised that the guy was using the brave man's sword to butcher horned pigs. The hero replied that such an artifact of the legendary class cuts like a legendary one. Thanks to the variabilities of this artifact, the hunt was extremely easy and successful. Costa reported that he heard a strange roar of an incomprehensible animal and suggested that the keeper check it out. Balash was not delighted with such an offer because he had not fully recovered yet, and the hero himself had fallen into this place on the way home. Suddenly, for no apparent reason, he began chopping up the pigs, declaring that they needed to finish them for dinner. However, Costa still suggested going to look at the beast, because fights were the most interesting to watch. The guardian said nothing but thought that the situation looked too serious to simply be an observer. A huge green tail, all covered with durable scales, whipped from side to side. Instead of a gorilla, a gigantic crocodile appeared in the huge hall. It threw its opponents in different directions, swallowing some. The dark elves looked at their enemy and did not dare to attack. They were amazed at how easily their brethren died in battle. Risa was unhappy that her subordinates could not gather their courage. The girl ordered them to immediately restore order in the camp. A squad of archers must keep their distance. Spearmen must stand in a row and prevent the beast from leaving the camp. The crocodile was amazed that just one order from the commander was enough, and the system was already in order. The girl reminded them that the beast could not use its left leg, so she ordered them to attack there and kill it. In any case, they needed to return the gate ball, and she did not care about the fate of the spy himself. Initially, the crocodile planned to take the ball and find out its key properties and deprive them of it. However, he understood that most likely he would not be able to escape with the ball. Therefore, the awakened one threw the bag with his loot as high as possible. Risa was horrified by such careless handling of such a great artifact. The spy only thought that the elves were too skilled at archery, so there was no point in trying to escape by air. He clearly had a new plan in mind, and the commander-in-chief looked at him and waited for the next step. In fact, the beast realized that its only chance to destroy the ball was to swallow it. The crocodile slammed its mouth shut with great force, hoping that the ball would break inside. Risa was horrified that all the work done recently had gone down the drain. The girl literally saw with her own eyes how the ball shattered into small pieces. She stood in the middle of the hall, opposite her almost defeated enemy and watched how he managed to deceive her. The girl was truly furious that this green beast had managed to so easily destroy their work. The spy had clearly made a huge mistake, as the commander-in-chief was truly furious. In order to somehow implicate the spy, the girl ordered all the archers to aim at him. The crocodile stood silently, completely surrounded on all sides by opponents. At this moment, he was completely prepared for his imminent, inevitable death. Suddenly, a little girl appeared in the man's thoughts, bleeding from her mouth. The man recalled the last minutes of his beloved daughter's life. All he could think about was that he would soon be able to meet his sweet little Anna. However, something clearly went wrong. Instead of being destroyed, the ball began to work. A huge stream of dark energy was released out of the lock, piercing the insides of the huge green crocodile, quickly being absorbed into its insides. The beast, ready to die, suddenly raised its head high, and black smoke poured out to save it. Even Riza did not expect such a reaction, but she noticed that something strange was happening to the spy. The girl ordered all the archers to shoot at the same time. Immediately after her words, more than 100 well-aimed archers lowered their bowstrings. The crocodile was pierced by sharp arrows into literally every part of its body. Suddenly, as if from a crack, a strange, thick smoke began to appear. It was getting closer and closer to the elves, making them worry. Many of them sought help and protection from their commander, Riza. However, only by turning to her did they notice that the girl herself was bleeding. A strange clot of energy, of an incomprehensible color, pierced the girl's body right through. Even one of the dark elves could not survive such a wound. While they were worried about their commander-in-chief, dark energy took over the beast's body more and more. The deputy commander was horrified by what was happening and ordered the remaining elves to retreat immediately. All the subordinates immediately rushed away from the scene, saving their lives. This is exactly the picture that our main character, Costa, found when he appeared right above the hole that had formed in the ceiling. The guy had just arrived and was still trying to figure out what was happening here. From the smoke, a huge green leg of a monster appeared, swollen to incredible sizes, and the once green crocodile itself turned into a huge, strange golem. There wasn't a single living soul left. Around him, everyone ran away. One of the elves charged his arrow with dark energy and aimed at the monster. He put a lot of his strength into the last blow, then released the arrow. The elf wanted to avenge his commander-in-chief, who died in this battle. However, this was not destined to happen, because at the last moment the monster felt threatened. It turned towards the shooter, which greatly surprised him. A huge beam of energy was suddenly released from the monster's mouth, moving straight towards the poor shooter's location. The impact was so powerful that it completely destroyed the entire small balcony on which the elf stood. He would most definitely have been dead if his comrade had not pushed him away at the last moment. The comrade reminded the dark elf that their main task was to prevent information from spreading. The commanders would not return, but they had to prevent information leakage and survive. At this moment, the energy began to spread in all directions and strike chaotically. The two elves barely managed to avoid inevitable death and escape deeper into the castle. Our main character calmly watched all this from above. The Guardian even clarified whether Costa was going to capture these dark elves. However, he noticed that the keeper himself had forbidden him to do this just recently, to which the wolf replied that this does not apply to other races. After all, karma is given in different quantities depending on the reasons and its volume. Costa realized that last time. The Guardian stopped him because, having harmed a person, he could not become a protector god due to changed karma. The guy also thought that the Dark Elves had the same laws of the world. They value the lives of their relatives and should not kill each other. However, judging by their last reaction to events, the guy was wrong. The Guardian noted that no creature deserves to die. However, the living cannot always avoid conflicts, and this is understandable. Moreover, these Dark Elves are unlikely to benefit people, which is why he asked Costa as a person. The hero replied that the Guardian too often asks questions that confuse him. The wolf noticed that the guy was too hostile. He may not want to become a protector god, but even so, such statements and actions only prove his immaturity. The hero was irritated by the gap between them, which was always felt at such moments. The guy spread his hands and said that he partially agreed with the words of the keeper. However, his main goal now is to save Dash's colleague from a scrape. The guy did not hide the fact that the Dark Elves also bothered him. However, At the moment, what interested him most was the black demonic energy. After all, at the moment it was very similar to what had recently been hiding in the fiery fox. Costa was simply interested in what kind of lousy demon was plotting these intrigues. It was unlikely that this was the work of the Dark Elves. In any case, the hero needed to save the man, so he jumped down.
The guy carefully landed right in front of the huge green monster. It just noticed him and slowly turned towards the new enemy. Costa was not at all afraid of his enemy. Turning to Dash's colleague locked inside, the guy called upon his powers. In the palm of his hand, he promised to free the man soon. Thanks to his abilities, small and large stones began to rise from the ground. More and more of them rose into the air, glowing with a yellow flame. Gradually, the stones began to twist in a spiral, as if they were in a whirlpool. From such a strain of magical power, even our hero's eyes turned blue.
Immediately after this, Costa directed this entire gigantic flow of energy, along with the stones, forward. His improvised weapon came closer and closer to the monster surrounding it. But the monster did not think of giving up quickly and again released a clot of energy from its mouth. The monster aimed right at the middle of the stream, intending to reach the enemy. However, his path was blocked by sand and stones that blocked his view. Now he stood completely inside this vortex and looked around. The guy had literally imprisoned the monster inside a cluster of stones covered with his energy. It was necessary to cleanse and free this man's core from demonic energy. Therefore, the guy clenched his hands tightly and increased the resistance of the wind and energy. It was a difficult confrontation. The hero decided that he needed to speed up. It must be faster than the cell division of the green beast. But the demonic energy that sat in the man's core was not going to give up. Even in this state, it forced her clots to release and attack our hero. One of them had already taken him out, inflicting a small wound on his left cheek. The guy only managed to dodge when several more new attacks were already rushing towards him. However, this reminded our hero of something from his past. He understood why this reminded him so much of the Firefox's situation. Even though the circumstances were different, the guy spread his arms to the side, causing the diameter of the vortex to expand. After this, he noticed that the streams that had previously attacked him began to collapse. After this, the hero realized that he was now moving in the right direction. The time had come to begin the next stage of liberating the green beast. Now, he unclenched his fists and concentrated energy in his open palms. The whirlwind gradually subsided, and only a small cloud of dust remained in the air. Gradually, the face of a man with green hair appeared, covered in cuts. Only now could Costa breathe a sigh of relief, but he failed to do so. After all, his friend Dash's colleague was still lying in front of him, covered in blood. The man was unconscious and clearly in very bad condition. The guy sighed wearily and told the keeper that he had assumed such an outcome of events. What interested him most now was why this man's blood was black. The keeper did not understand why the guy was hesitating. He even shouted at him, and Costa, meanwhile, carefully squatted down in front of the man. He carefully touched his hand to the leaked black remnant of demonic energy and realized that it was someone's creation. However, the guy decided that he would deal with this a little later. Now he had more important business. Therefore, the hero grabbed the man, who was lying unconscious in front of him, by the clothes. Costa carefully placed the man on his shoulder, trying to cause as little pain as possible. The guy noticed that this man's mana core was destroyed, so now he needed to restore it. First of all, it was necessary to find a deserted place. So, the hero and the guardian pushed off the ground with force and got out in one jump.
After some time, the man began to gradually regain consciousness. He clearly felt tired and overwhelmed. Slowly, he opened his eyes and realized that he was in an unfamiliar place. The man was able to focus his gaze on the young guy, who stood in front of him with a white puppy on his shoulder. The awakened one clearly did not expect to see such a strange picture, so he shouted sharply and loudly. Our hero also did not at all expect that the man would come to his senses so quickly, so he screamed along with him.
They were lucky that they were in a house in the middle of the forest, otherwise someone might have heard them. It took Costa some time to explain to the man what had happened here. The guardian lay and listened all this time. The hero now noticed that the man was in critical condition, so he offered to talk about the details after he swallowed the medicine. The green-haired man thought for a while, then asked to convey his words to the association. The man remarked with a resigned air that his life, as a whole, had no regrets left. However, The hero did not even listen to him to the end and interrupted, saying that everything was too easy for him. He noticed that he found a man just while walking his dog, and now he wants to die in front of him because he didn't save him, even though he could have.
The guy respected the green-haired man's reasons, but said that he would not die today. The man noticed that the guy behaved very impudently for his age. However, the hero noted that he was already 35 years old, after which the man resigned himself and did not appear to protest further. He even agreed to take medication and be patient while our hero treated him. The man felt that something had split his mana core in half. Even the best healer from the Hunter Association could not cope with such a severe wound. Costa knew all this, which is why he used one of the only 3 pills that he grabbed before his return. He ordered the man to put it in his mouth and hold the cloth between his teeth so as not to bite his tongue. The medicine, like a magic chain, must circulate throughout the body for it to be effective. Now, the man's mana core was fragmented, and the magic chains did not function. Therefore, Costa himself was going to infuse magical power into the man and help distribute the medicine throughout his body. He added that this pill was like a defibrillator, only resuscitating the flow of mana, not the blood flow. As soon as the man took the pill into his mouth and bit into it, the guy suddenly added that now he should not lose consciousness. But it was already too late, because not even a couple of moments had passed before the awakened one passed out. Costa remembered that he himself was preparing to die for the first time and fainted 100 times. However, this man could not lose consciousness, so the guy hit him sharply on the head. He ordered him to endure until the last, because this green beast was one of the best in the country. He might die as soon as he loses consciousness, but the man already felt his body. He began to hear some strange sounds and was even preparing to die peacefully. However, Costa ordered him to think about his family, which forced the man to go inside himself. The guy directed his hands to the man's body and began to gradually pour his energy into him.
At this moment, a quest appeared from a member of the state-controlled Rainbow Six. The green beast, whose real name is Yegor. Often, when people talk about a person with a high position in government agencies and someone who is in the top 6 of the country, they immediately imagine his brilliant past. Yegor's life before becoming the green beast was very mediocre. He had a wonderful, loving wife and a beautiful little daughter. The man sincerely considered himself the happiest person on earth. Finally, he had everything he had dreamed of for a very long time. He was an orphan, and his name was firmly rooted in the first lines of the boy's register. Not only did he not have a single relative, but his birthday was also considered the day he arrived at the shelter. The guy lived his days quietly and peacefully in an orphanage, but everything changed dramatically when he took even one step beyond it.
Without parents, whether a troublemaker or a quiet one, it didn't matter. They were all called problematic. Because of this prejudice, he was unable to make a single close friend. Therefore, the guy grew up alone, without a single close attachment. He felt it only in relation to animals. They lived on the mountain behind the school, where he climbed at every opportunity. Perhaps they were the reason why the guy later became a zoo worker. To him, the man who preferred animals to people, wonderful words were later addressed. The girl admitted that she liked how Yegor always took care of animals like people. She was very embarrassed but still took the first step and invited the guy to meet. He was also very embarrassed by what was happening, because it was his first time, but he agreed. It was this girl, and later their daughter, who gave Yegor the opportunity to return to the human world again.
A man deeply immersed in his thoughts and memories was brought out of this state by his little daughter. Yegor asked his Anna not to cling to him like a monkey when she sat on his neck. The man took the girl off and moved her into his arms in front of him, telling her to look to the side. The girl reluctantly obeyed her father and slowly looked around. At the moment, they were standing right at the foot of a beautiful waterfall. The girl was delighted to see a rainbow so close to her for the first time. Yegor explained to his daughter that this was a waterfall, and water from the lake at the top of the mountain collected in one place and fell down. Anna was interested in what happened to the fish that lived at the top of the mountain. The man joked that they were diligently swimming up the falling water.
Back home, the girl did not believe her father, but promised to check with her mother later. She asked to buy her a chocolate bar if it turned out that the man had lied. He suggested replacing everything with vitamin juice so that their mother wouldn't scold them for such harmful things. Just at that moment, the girl found her husband and daughter and ran up to them. She was worried because she couldn't find him for a long time. Yegor was simply showing his daughter the waterfall. Although her parents initially assumed this and even suggested that the girl relax and wait, the wife said that there was a beautiful rainbow in front of the waterfall, so she would like to submit photographs. Yegor had the camera, and they all headed together closer to the water. People struck a pose and began looking for the best shot. The girl had to work hard to make the rainbow clearly visible.
To begin with, she made a family portrait of her parents and husband with their daughter. She really liked the photo, so the girl suggested taking a few more pictures. Meanwhile, her parents were chatting with their granddaughter, trying to make her laugh. The girl screamed with joy, the smiles of her relatives until they ran out of energy. After that, Yegor handed his daughter into her arms and asked her to take his place. The girl ran to her parents so that she could take a photo with them.
Little Anna began to teach her grandparents how to make a heart with their fingers. She even made 2 hearts at once with both hands and addressed them to her loved ones. Meanwhile, Yegor was catching good shots and taking pictures of his joyful family. The guy did not notice at all how something strange began to happen with the waterfall. Not far from them, the space in front of him began to literally crack into pieces, like glass. Yegor noticed the crack only when it had already reached a fairly large size. The next moment, the space split and a huge black hole appeared in it. Then, this happened several more times near the first crack. From one of them appeared the head of a huge shark with yellow eyes, which immediately attacked the first person it came across. A huge bear crawled out of the other and immediately knocked down and pinned some guy to the ground.
All this happened before the eyes of Yegor, who was just beginning to understand that he had built an ideal life. He subconsciously believed that this happiness would leave him sooner or later. After all, nothing is given for free, and for him, such a life was a luxury. Therefore, he thought that someday it would definitely be taken away from him. The only thing the guy wanted all this time had not come true. He desperately prayed that if something terrible happened, it would not be in front of his eyes. However, he was unlucky because behind his beloved family was the biggest crack. A huge insect immediately got out of it and rushed at the nearest people. The guy was desperately trying to stop the monster from harming his loved ones. Yegor rushed with all his might to help his family, hoping to save them. The man saw from afar that his beloved wife was wounded. There was a huge, deep cut on her back. At first, the guy even tried to convince himself that the girl had simply gotten dirty in something, and during his delay, the monster had already managed to completely get out of the crack. Now, it hung directly over Yegor's relatives, who were now all lying on the ground, unconscious. The guy realized that this huge mantis had deprived him of everything with one blow. Yegor fell to his knees and began desperately calling his beloved wife by name. He looked at the girl's back, and his whole body were shaking with fear and the awareness of misfortune. As soon as the guy decided and found the strength to touch his wife's body, he was not allowed to do so. The huge mantis lashed out with its claw, cutting through the air with incredible speed. It hit right at the place where Yegor was literally a second ago. The guy was thrown back with incredible force and speed. It seemed to him that from just one contact with such claws, his body was torn apart. However, this was not the case. The guy flew quite a long distance and landed hard on the ground.
At this time, the monster raised its head up and let out a victorious cry. It stood right above the green beast's family and waved its huge claws menacingly. The love for his family, and especially for his daughter, made Yegor come to his senses. He rose to his feet and was ready to fight the monster. The green beast rushed toward the huge mantis. After what happened to his family, the guy was no longer afraid of this monster. On the way, he kept swearing at the monster and picked up some kind of sharp stick as a weapon. The guy had nothing to lose, so he attacked the monster with zeal.
Just at that moment, when Yegor ran past the bodies of his family, he heard a familiar voice. The guy looked back and noticed that his daughter was still alive, protected by her mother's body. This all happened literally in an instant. When the guy could no longer stop, he noticed that the girl had come to her senses and was very scared. The very next moment, Yegor had to defend himself from an attack by the praying mantis. Its claws were very sharp, and Yegor's weapon was useless. Therefore, the guy fell to the ground, and his stick was easily cut into pieces. The mantis continued to advance on the green beast without stopping. This time, its claws pierced the ground right next to the guy's head. Yegor's entire consciousness was now absorbed only by the thought that his daughter was still alive. The girl was already sitting next to her mother and crying with fear. She was calling for her beloved daddy. When a huge shadow covered her, Anna slowly turned around to see what was happening behind her. Jaeger understood that he could now lose the last survivor of his family. At that moment, something arose deep inside him. Some strange feeling grew stronger and stronger with every step he took. It appeared in his chest, but now it was spreading throughout his body. A strange energy and green glow enveloped the entire guy from head to toe.
The claw of the huge praying mantis was already a few millimeters from the girl's body. One more step, and it would not be the human foot that steps on the ground, but the paw of the beast. The monster's huge, sharp claw was torn off with one strong jerk. A huge green tiger carried her away in its powerful teeth. Anya, with tears in her eyes, out of fear, clung to her mother's body. The tiger stopped nearby, holding the severed claw of the praying mantis in its mouth. At that time, it roared in pain and became furious from its wounds.
Something green and striped quickly flashed before the monster's eyes. The huge tiger spat out its claw and rushed back to the monster. This time, its target was the head of the monster with two huge yellow eyes. The tiger opened its mouth wide and sank its sharp fangs right into the neck of the mantis. Not even a moment passed before the headless monster fell to the ground, and the tiger rushed away, carrying in its jaws part of the enemy it had defeated. It stopped nearby, walking inside and looking at the monster. Another moment, and Jaeger, in human form, was rushing towards his daughter. He ran to Anna, hoping that everything was okay with her. However, the man immediately realized that he was late. His hands began to tremble. In front of him, on the ground, lay his dead beloved wife and wounded daughter. The young man looked at the body of his wife, which was becoming paler every minute. Then he turned his gaze to the little girl who lay unconscious next to her. The man was already sweating from tension. His whole body was becoming numb from fear. He looked at what was left of his family, tears flowing from his eyes. Jaeger saw that his daughter was still alive, but she was too weak to even sit up on her own. The man had to carefully put his hand under the baby's head and help her rise. He tried to calm the baby down all the time, promising her that he would think of something. Anna complained that her stomach hurt very badly, and the man could not stop the bleeding. He held his little daughter in his arms and understood that she would die any minute. Under the girl, there was already a whole pool of blood that flowed out of the wound on her stomach. The girl said that she felt cold, so Jaeger tried to hug his daughter as tightly as possible and warm her up. Anna was glad that Dad came to her aid and did not leave her alone. She even laughed. The girl smiled and said that she loved her daddy more than anything in the world. She wanted to touch her father's face with her hand, but the strength left her. Anna no longer made a single sound. Jaeger realized that his daughter had just died in his arms. It took him a few seconds for the thought to sink into his head. Then, the man burst into tears, leaned over to the girl and said that Dad also loved her more than anything in the world. After some time, the man carefully shifted the girl to the ground. Now, in front of him, lay the dead bodies of his beloved wife and daughter.
Daughter, wife, father-in-law, and mother-in-law. It was at this moment that Jaeger dreamed that God, if he existed, would turn out to be an unsuspecting fool. He was ready to follow his will with pleasure if, as a reward, he would allow him to save the lives of the people he loved. Jaeger was grateful that he was able to meet people born in love and promised to devote himself entirely to this goal. After this, he turned into a huge green elephant and rushed to protect the people remaining in the park.
Costa realized that this thought was driving the man when he burst into the dark elf base. He could see all of this in the man's head while he lay unconscious and thought about his family. Finally, after some time, when the medicine took effect, the man came to his senses and opened his eyes. Jaeger asked the guy how long he had spent unconscious, but Costa replied that all the most dangerous things were left behind. Jaeger looked at the man and was disappointed that he chose this path. Jaeger just turned his back to the guy and added that he had nothing to say to such a boy. Costa realized that the man felt bad and was going to die. This was clearly reflected on his face. He was silent for a while. Why did he say that? He recognized this feeling. He remembered himself at a time when he had only recently found himself in the world of spirits. It wasn't the same feeling, but he thought they might be similar, and smugly concluded it.
The guy recalled the feeling when he stood in the pouring rain, which helped hide his tears. He added that death leaves nothing behind. When someone dies, there must be someone left to remember the dead person. But now, the only one who will remember all of this is Costa. All these little things that Jaeger's wife and daughter loved, that made them happy, now he alone remembers. Absolutely all these little things that make up a person's personality.
These words made a huge impression on the green beast, who was still lying with his back to the heroes. For some time, they remained in silence. Jaeger lay facing the wall, and Costa sat behind him. After a while, the guy sighed heavily and decided that he was minding his own business. He asked Jaeger to forget about his last words. He simply said it for moral reasons. However, these words still had an effect on the man. He sat up and asked the guy to help him restore his mana core.
Costa was surprised that the man still chose to continue living. Jaeger still could not immediately answer this question. He sat thinking for a long time and then said that he still had a lot of things to do, and there are people who rely only on him. Costa was surprised by such an accurate answer, but agreed with him. A light came on in a house in the middle of the forest, which marked the beginning of a new life for the green beast. Sometime later, Costa was furious that they decided to throw a party in his restaurant to mark the release of the green beast. 3 weeks later, the guy had to urgently prepare a lot of food. His mother and assistant had to run around with boxes. He cursed at Dasha because his family wanted to live in peace, and she was throwing another party. Although she reassured him that there should only be 3 people, herself, the beast, and Costa, the hero tried to calm down. He had a lot of experience and friendship with this girl. If he started to be indignant now, she would come running and mock him. Instead, he suggested finding a more reliable place because information from the conversations of such guests should not leak out.
However, Dasha noticed that there was no more secluded and reliable place in Seoul than this restaurant. Therefore, the girl promised to come tomorrow and agree on the date and time of the reception. The devil's vine, its size justifies its name, is strong enough to swallow even a black bear, which represents the first rank of danger at once. She's just looking for a beast that the demons will keep as a pet. However, even demons can be in danger if they let their guard down before the monster of disaster.
Costa sits at the table,